it looks like it's not letting me do comments again. So how am I supposed to post the link? Starting with no, not let me add comments so you guys can get in here. Hello, testing 1 2 3. Yeah, it's not letting me add comments again, so I don't know how to publish the link. Think about this. Yeah, my plan was to make a little redo this video about feminism, partly to Quintica, and I could still do that, but I was going to let you it says chat is disabled and comments are disabled. What am I supposed to do? I guess, you know, you want to type the whole son of a bitchin' thing in. It's ridiculous. Yeah, I found the part that says enable comments, but they're not enabled. So I can't change the title now. Oh, okay, I can put it in the description. Here we go. Let's try this. Oh, the dog's excited. So excited. Finally. Okay, so this should put it in the description. All right. Not sure what's going on with the comments, but whatever. Oh, dog. Barky dog. All right. So the link is in the description. Great. Dog's done barking, maybe. All right. So on feminism and various things like that. So First of all, on the Gamergate knowledge, I have followed Gamergate from the beginning. I haven't followed it in great detail. I don't see how it's important. I've made a comment to you. The video didn't go through, but I made a comment to you to this effect that you guys don't seem to realize I've already agreed that like worrying about issues in video games is much lesser than other feminist issues. It's not unrelated. It's not totally unimportant, and you ought to understand that, because Gamergate, as a response to that, is certainly not more important than that. It's at the same level, maybe a little bit lower. In my opinion, probably a little bit lower. And I'm not comparing, this idea, this thing with the bi kid that wanted to use the girls' bathroom and stuff. That's a interesting subject. It's certainly not just about feminism at all. Really about feminism, though feminists might get involved with things like that. There's definitely overlap with the gender studies, activism kind of thing. But whatever, there's so many, we can unravel that can of worms. It's not analogous to my example of Saudi Arabia, which is about, if you admit, which you've otherwise admitted as well, that there is sometimes a reason for feminism, that it is possible, and yet you still want to tell me to defend the ethics of other people I disagree with, and so on and so forth. And that's ridiculous for reasons I've been saying. And I don't think people can deny that a feminist in Saudi Arabia deserves our support. And that is sufficient to prove that feminism itself is not automatically an invalid way of looking at the problem of legal oppression of women, right? And nothing about these details of Gamergate affect my position whatsoever. And especially as I started this and noticed Anita through Thunderfoot, and my comments about her primarily been on her videos in which she's saying, here's an obvious trope in a video game, and people are going, no, that must mean you want to censor it. Well, maybe they do want to censor it. Maybe she does. Hasn't happened yet. It's not an imminent threat. Right now, women can't drive or show their face in Saudi Arabia. That's also not an imminent threat because it's already happening. So it's not a threat when it's already happening. So you have a non-imminent, Congress is not about to make video games illegal or regulate them in any way. On the other hand, you can imagine why it comes someday, because it's basically, X-rated violence in a lot of these games. And I don't think society's on the record about these kinds of things in the past, and eventually they do want to come do something about it. So, but it's not particularly imminent. I'll be on your side with the anti-censorship, right? But I'm not going to be on your side pretending that that the murder fantasies are not murder fantasies. They're totally ordinary, yeah, to us in this warlike world, but to peaceful people that were never exposed to this violent culture, the people of the future they would have to be, there's no reason to think that having fun pretending to murder people won't look just as gross as having fun pretending to rape them, or pretending that they're children that you're killing and raping, or any of those things. It'll probably look pretty primitive. I'm pretty sure it will. I have no idea now what these notes were like temporary notes for using right away. I fan alt. I have no idea what it's talking about. Describe what the Saudi Arabia example was. I discussed how the fact that you're making these sweeping generalizations, and then you acknowledge that there are different factions, and then you say, oh, but the mainstream. So you can make the sweeping generalization that is targeted at me, even though it's not targeted at me, and that's all okay because it's the mainstream. And yet you could say first world feminists, or you could do all kinds of things to distinguish and target, and you'd rather not narrow in. You don't want to narrow in on the particular faction or particular individuals. You want to and everybody, and this seems what you want because it's what you're doing. You want to pretend that applies to everybody. You don't want to surgically remove radical feminism and have the rest of feminism left over, because we're still going to go pretending to rape women in games is pretty sick. A lot of people think I'm trying to switch things around. It's look, and you've done this as far as like I've said as a feminist, but I've also explained that really this is an alliance with feminism. I do not violate what I consider principles of feminism, and I've run into feminism mostly when there have been helping me, and I consider my main issue in terms of activism, peace activism, which is inherently international, right? And so that should explain to you some of my reaction to people going, feminists are just assholes and they just want to be better than everybody else. It's like, well, it's not that way in Saudi Arabia. Let's get the whole world to that level, and then maybe I'll be worried about your video games at that point. That one says the unimportance. The unimportance. I guess that's probably about the unimportance of the first world problems, but everything is important to a certain degree. There's nothing wrong with working on a problem that is not the top problem. Maybe you have an expertise in that. Maybe you've noticed it. Maybe you're not aware of other top problems. Maybe you even think it is a top problem, and we all can have our own view of that. But let's say you don't think it's the top problem, but you still want to work on it because you think it's important, right? How men are treated in divorce court is it a problem? Is it as bad as the MRAs say? No, but is it bad? I got screwed. You know, I could tell you I totally got screwed in various ways. Also, just in that I did everything for the divorce. My wife slowed it down, and yet she got all my retirement that happened between the 6 years when we were separated trying to get a divorce. So I didn't find that. That's important. It's affected me. This is around here. But, you know, people that aren't allowed to drive cars and can't show their face, that's more important. War, that's more important. Oppression, economic oppression, more important. And you can't be saying, oh, you stupid feminist first world problems. And then when I say, oh, what about supporting feminists in Saudi Arabia? Not to you, Quintica, necessarily. You haven't given this response, but I've got it many times now. Acting like it doesn't matter. Who cares? You know, that's not our world. Well, it is to me. I'm a peace activist. To me, the results of war lead to all these kinds of oppressions and inequities, which are the subsequent problems that we're fighting in all the other areas of activism. That's my view. That's my personal theory. And so, you know, it's quite clear that on this world, we're not done with the need for feminism. When women are just generally not allowed to drive, for example, I think that shows a gender-based bias that requires gender-based activism. The idea that you could go over there and say, women should be able to drive, and you say that because all people should be free. And people say, well, they are free. They don't want to drive. You know, not everybody's equally good. You know, not everybody is equally good at different things. And so, you know, we're not restricting them. They're just unable to drive well enough for us to let them to drive. And no, you've got to say women are capable of driving, and to prohibit that is to prohibit their personal freedom in an unacceptable way. Now, mind you, honor killings is bigger than that one, and so on and so forth. And having the wars in the first place, bigger than them all. I mean, the situation of women in Iraq was better before the first Iraq war. It was better before the second Iraq war. And people say, oh, well, it's because of the Muslim. Well, guess what? Radical Islam also got stronger after the first Iraq war. Is that a coincidence? Well, I don't think so, because it always happens that way. So, yeah, that's that. I did a long hangout yesterday with Das Spook. If anybody wants to come in and have a conversation, now is the time, because other than that, I'm going to wrap it up and just call it a 20-minute video with 5 minutes of putting up a link that nobody needed. I did enjoy talking to Das Spook, and always do. we talked about maybe setting up an interview or actually a debate. This might be a good time to bring this up. Anybody that didn't see this, it was a long video, long hangout. So, we might like to have a presidential debate. If any of you know of the, Jimmy McMillans and the people that are running, we want to hear their voice. This is a good forum, and I'm genuinely interested, and I always have been interested in those kinds of candidates. And I think those kind of candidates sometimes break through and can accomplish things that otherwise would never be accomplished incrementally through an establishment candidate. And at the very least, we can help them get the messages out there that made them willing to do the hard work of running a campaign, really a campaign at any scale, is a commitment. And it can be a scary commitment, actually, and you can be put on the spot and have to have opinions about things that normally aren't your main issues, and so on and so forth. So maybe we could have a debate. I'd love to have a hang out with 2 to 6 candidates and try to keep my mouth mostly shut and just be satisfied asking some questions. And as I said, I'm genuinely interested in these tier, this kind of candidate with a lot more I watch all the mainstream debates, but my real genuine interest, I probably enjoy this debate more because, there's so much shadow play and corruption and this bullshit, and they're pandering to people, and it's not me they're pandering to. So it's just like, so I'd rather have a debate of people that aren't going to pander at all and will actually try to, want a chance to get their message out there in contrast and concord with other people. So maybe that's something we could do. I don't really know who to go talk to. So, hey, if you guys know anybody running for president, I think I might be trying to set up a presidential debate hangout. And having said that, is there anything else I want to use? I don't make videos that often now. It really bugged me, that lost video. Oh, yeah, I had some ideas about why Trump actually is the best Republican. And I think basically people, one lesson is people like other people that air dirty laundry, and that's the reality TV situation. And so, it used to be if you aired dirty laundry, people didn't like you. They listened to the dirty laundry, didn't like the people with the laundry. They also didn't like you. Now people seem to love the dirty laundry. And Trump's the only person on that stage that's going to point out Kasich was, involved in Lehman Brothers or whatever. Now, can you believe it when he does point things like that out? No, but he brings it up. He says what they're all thinking. Bernie's a communist. They're afraid to. He says it sounds like dirty laundry to them. Reality, I think it's good because it's like that's why it's good that Bernie's just saying, yeah, I'm a democratic socialist, and here's what that means, because he's going to get called a communist anyway. And if there isn't a Trump, it'll be whispered, it'll be in the blogs, it'll, so just take it up front, don't deny it, own it. And frankly, things like that, don't get me wrong, my opinion of Trump is not raised at all. I just realized that the Jebs and Rubios and Kasich's, just because they seem more functional and possibly competent, it occurred to me, well, they're actually just puppets, and they're puppets for people that are just raping this world, as far as I'm concerned, still. And so yeah, that would make Trump better. Also, if Trump were to win, then Bernie might be able to win. So, oh, hey, Vic.
Howdy.
You got here just in time. I was just about to bail.
Oh, you're leaving?
No, I was waiting for someone, and it was, you showed up. And I don't know what my last note, I was looking through some notes of videos I was going to make. And
yeah, I wasn't listening, so I'm not sure what the topic is or what you've been talking about, but.
Oh, I was just talking about some of the feminism rundown of my view of feminism, kind of pointed at Quintica. We don't necessarily have to go through that, but we could. And then this other thing was, I had a kind of a revelation of why Trump actually probably is the best Republican, Whereas before, I would be like, I'd rather have Kasich. Jeb is probably, competent or knows competent people. Rubio, I think he's just a deer in the headlights. But again, he's part of an organization where people actually know how things work enough to, have a job and get it done day by day kind of thing. But I think, I think they're all puppets. And Trump, and I realize people like Trump, I think, because he's willing to air dirty laundry. And it's something we've never really seen. All the gotchas are so planned. We don't really see out of nowhere this, like when Trump came back at Kasich saying, you were the managing board member of Lehman Brothers. We just don't see that. You don't do that. The plebes cannot judge that stuff, so we just don't go there, and he will. But and I was also pointing out, that doesn't mean I like Trump any more than I ever did. I think it just means that I realize how little I like the rest of those guys.
Yeah, the thing with Trump is that he knows how to play the game, and that's what I find kind of disgusting about this whole process, is that it really is a game. It's almost like I'm watching Big Brother, like where everybody starts, trying to like manipulate everybody and try to like say certain things that they know will, that they know will impact them and influence them in some way. And it's just so slimy. But the sad thing is that it probably will work, right? It probably works on a lot of people. Like that little stunt that he pulled at the end of the last debate on CNBC,
Right.
when he like says that he managed to negotiate it down to like 2 hours. That probably would work with a lot of idiots out there. Like, damn, yeah, he knows how to get shit done. It's like,
well, they helped him by denying that happened. But anybody following the news read that, and it's like, okay, how does it really sort out? Well, it certainly wasn't always 2 hours. There was some amount of negotiation, or so anyway. When they say that, and then they make a snide comment of, no, it was just 2. Even to me, and I'm tracking things, it looks like. Or it looks like, it makes him look better than if he just said it out of the blue, which he had said it in his closing statement. I mean, that reaction from the host, I think, made it look stronger. But the other thing is, that really was terribly hosted. I mean, that question to Trump about comic book campaign is totally inappropriate, totally an attack. I don't see the other questions, like, the one where Cruz went off on a tangent about, you're calling him a comic book villain and you're calling him stupid, can't do math. And the question he had gotten was actually about, like, you don't support this budget deal. Do you think you can negotiate? I mean, something, you have to have some deal. And he skipped that question. Now, that question might have been hard hitting or even worded a little bit, like, I think there was a part of it, it was worded like, do you really have the kind of personality it takes? But fair. Whereas going through Trump's egotism, that at best, that question should end with, do you think you know how to listen to others? Do you ever find that you're wrong? There's a lot of gotchas, but to say, are you just a comic book candidate? That's ridiculous. And it opened up for all of those other guys, Christie and the rest, to act like the whole thing was an attack piece that would never happen to Democrats, which, is not really true. Though I would say these Republican debates, I've been surprised. The very first one, they were really a lot of gotchas. And if you watch the follow-up coverage, they actually focus in like, when we come back, we're going to got some gotchas in. Like, that's how we're supposed to find out. Who knows what the hell they're talking about? But anyway, I'm just saying things we all know, left, right, whatever. You and me are both, I think, in the middle. Actually, we're on the opposite side of enough lines to have some good arguments. But really, I mean, you and I are both disgusted by this particular form of the circus, and I like circuses. I mean, I don't mind some of it to be a circus, but all of it, and to talk with other candidates for 3 hours, and what they're looking at is the snappy comebacks and the jokes.
Right. And that's the thing, though. I would bet that like the majority of people who vote, they probably don't even vote on the issues mostly. They're either voting right down party lines, or just stupid things like, oh, I like this guy. This is the type of guy I'd love to have a beer with, just bullshit like that, and not actual qualifications or experience. The thing with Trump, though, I was actually discussing this with my girlfriend the other day, is that as scary as the prospect is of having a Trump as president, right? I wonder if like he might actually be effective because he's so fucking crazy, right? Because maybe the Russians, maybe the North Korea, maybe the Iranians, maybe they would think, man, we better not fuck with this guy because he's so fucking crazy that if we don't like work with this guy, maybe he will drop a nuke on us or something. Maybe he will.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't.
Well,
fuck with a crazy person.
there's the whole famous thing that Kissinger used that with Nixon. Kissinger would go and, he'd be like, oh, like a good cop, bad cop. Oh, that Nixon, you didn't, he's crazy. Better take my deal. I've got his ear. He trusts me. And there's some truth to that. That can always happen. And I do believe that in some level he knows how to negotiate. I don't believe he knows how to manage the money, or that he seems to be a good manager or hire good people, which you really need to do. I think there's a little too much showman, but there's definitely some skills in that as well. The thing I was thinking, though, too, is the Trump we have from history, other than good, has been a fairly liberal, modern guy. He's been pro-choice. Maybe he still is. Maybe, I don't think he is like, he would build that wall, but he might put a big door in it. I don't think he actually hates Mexicans. I think he probably wants to build a wall. That's the business he's in. He probably knows a bunch of guys that would love to get those contracts as well. So, but would he really invade another country or nuke another country or anything like that? I don't really think so. I think that shit's bad for business.
That's a gamble,
I think he wants
right?
to build a fucking Trump Tower in Tehran more than he wants to bomb it.
I agree.
That's just my take. But I think where it really gets scary and where it can get Nazi, this kind of stuff can get out of hand, is I think if you lived in Washington and you screwed Trump over, or forget that, you insulted him, you insulted a friend of his, whatever, that you could get all kinds of, Chris Christie, same thing, all of them to a certain degree, using the levers of power to go ahead and smack someone out around, and you shouldn't have done that, lose your job, whatever. And that can get out of hand. But that part of my revelation was realizing I'm not any of those people. Those people need a little shaking around. So I don't want them to be unfairly brutalized. And not every person there deserves what they might get in that situation. Probably would disproportionately go to the people that weren't, lick spittles and kissing up to him. The exact opposite of the people that I'd want to see, like illegally manipulated or whatever their life. But on the other hand, I do think it shows a kind of limit. I think that if you crossed him personally, he'd be like a little king dictator. It's good to be the king. I don't think he would be invading other countries and stuff. I do think he would ruin international affairs if he actually believes that you can build a wall and make the Mexicans pay for it. If he actually believes that he would have any power, any ability towards coming into the country with the 30% tariff. It's an American company. I don't think you can actually even do that, just because
I guess my concern is that, we make a lot of assumptions there. It's a big gamble in my opinion. And the thing is that, there's a lot of machismo that goes on in politics. So if like Putin strikes me as one of these male chauvinist type, guys,
oh, you think?
tries to be an alpha male, right? So I mean, if he just assumes that Donald Trump is bluffing, right, and he tries to call his bluff, and it turns out that Donald Trump isn't bluffing, and he would, react if push came to shove, then that could lead to a total fucking disaster. I mean, we're talking, it could lead to like a world war potentially. I mean, this is the type of things that I worry about with Trump as president.
Right, because if you want to say Trump did well at what he did, and I think he's a little rich boy story's fair enough to him, but he also, did with some help and whatnot in the backing. He did, he built this, he has built a bunch of stuff, but he's like this American businessman where, you go in, what do they call it when you go in unprepared, kind of go in hot or whatever, like a SWAT team. He has that kind of thing. That's the bravery. You're winging it. Oh, it didn't work this time. Well, file bankruptcy, reorganize, tell the bank they'd rather have 700 million than the whole billion, and, keep going. That doesn't work in international affairs. If suddenly, even forget nukes, just, you have conventional destruction of a country with 15 million people in it, it doesn't come back. You don't go to bankruptcy court and those people come back to life. So I just think going in hot is not the kind of thing we need at the top. And I don't see him hiring the best diplomats, you know, to kind of cover for him being hot-headed. But you know, I don't know. I just realized that he's goofy and out there is goofy, but I don't think he's actually any more goofy than any of the other Republicans we're faced with right now in reality, or than Hillary.
Well, I mean, the thing is, he's pretty good with the gamesmanship, because I mean, I gotta say, he really does know how to play the game. I mean, he's clearly, you could tell by the polls that he knows how to play
Evidently.
the game. And you know, it's like, take the religion thing, right? Does anybody, I mean, do you believe for a second that this man is actually religious? Because I don't.
Obviously not. Yeah, I would say that's a clear one. Like, I was wondering if he's changed on abortion. I don't wonder about that. I do not, but he's just pandering.
He is. He's pandering, and he's
It's almost not pandering.
It.
It's almost better than the pandering, because it's almost so obvious. It's more like salesmanship, right? A salesman comes, you know, you're not his favorite person in the world, but if he treats you like that, okay, he's being patronizing in the positive sense, right? In the salesman sense. So I think it's kind of less pandering than you normally get, but it seems pretty obvious to me. I mean, you've seen the speeches when he started saying that, and he's coming out with the Bible of just a few times.
Right, and then he's using it as a way to
coming upside down.
He's using it as a way to attack Ben Carson. I mean, which is, I mean, it's just amazing that he's just using every tactic in the book to win at all costs, and that might actually play well if he actually got elected, because he knows how to manipulate people. He knows. I mean, obviously he's being advised. I don't think he's coming up with all this on his own. Clearly, he has pretty savvy.
Oh, I wonder. I don't know. I don't know. I think who would advise you to insult the face of a candidate, call them slow, you know, just endlessly. You know, usually they slip us out. But sometimes an advisor will say, you'll be able to slip this one in, just this backhanded compliment insult. But he does that so much, I'm thinking, that doesn't look like an advisor. That looks like, look, I'm Trump. I wrote a book. I know how to sell to people. And I had this reality TV show. And if you think I just had it, no, I was paying attention. I saw what people reacted to. And I found out this kind of dirty laundry they like to hear about. The kind of dirty laundry people want to hear dirty laundry won't hold against me for bringing up. And it's got to be him, because who else? But that's an interesting question. I'm going to have to look up who he's got in his staff, if it's anybody.
That's true, but it could also be that since his advisors have now, I mean, he basically he dipped his toe in the water. He realized that it's effective. His advisors realized that it's pretty effective. It's working. So maybe now they're running with it, and now they've changed their strategy a bit. Now they're saying, yeah, maybe you should be a little bit incendiary when you talk about such and such. You know, I think people will like that. Maybe you know, I think he's changing the landscape of politics to a certain extent. He's changing the way, and I kind of like it, to be honest.
Well, that part has been positive. He's shaking these things up. We're talking about who was head of Lehman Brothers and who screwed over HP, which, again, my thing against Carly is I've known about her for years. Lucent. I worked for AT&T when they split up and made Lucent, and then I watched her go to HP and destroy it. So, you know, it happens to be a thing. Kasich was involved with Lehman Brothers, though, which I thought, what the hell? How do Trump knows that and I don't know it. But so it's good that he's shaking that up, and I think, and, you know, bringing things down to a lower level isn't always a bad thing. I mean, this is a way of making it more accessible to the public.
True.
But if it's just happening now, it doesn't mean it's going to have good results. It's like, yeah, maybe in 60 years when leaders can actually talk straight to people and they understand each other, then it'll make a good election. But right now, at the best, if Trump was elected, it'd be sort of a dangerous die roll of anything could happen.
Right, and that's yeah, I don't think.
And that's why I was thinking, well, I'd rather have a Kasich. I mean, I remember when I hated him, he used to be on the conservative wing and made me say Bob Doles aren't so bad. Could we have some Bob Doles back? And then I was having the same feeling about Kasich compared to Trump. But that's what I'm saying. Now I don't know, because you know, but anyway, the positives for someone like Kasich or Jeb is they're not going to always go in hot. They might make stupid decisions, but even the Bush administration probably didn't go in as hot and unprepared with as little knowledge about stuff as Trump would. Because, I mean, that does seem to be a thing of his. I mean, because I say that because when I try to picture how could I trade, I've never liked him. How can I praise him and just acknowledge what there is there? I don't have to like him or like it. Mm-hmm. And I would say, it's that poker playing American thing. They say American businessmen play poker, Japanese businessmen play Go. And you can see these metaphors that people from their cultures that they use, and how, and there is in American business. And it's one of the reasons it could achieve so much, that the people are willing to, he's not bluffing, I'm going to win with this pair of queens, or he's bluffing, I'm going to wear with, that you pull that off sometimes is a good thing, but also it is risky. And when you get to international affairs, countries,
well, yeah, that's the thing.
I don't think he would have a problem with Russia, though.
It would be interesting. I gotta say, it would be scary, but it would be interesting because he definitely knows how to push his weight around, right? He knows, like, that's the thing. Some of these politicians, they don't know the leverage that they have, right? I mean, America is a very powerful country, and some politicians, they don't know how to leverage that power as well as they could. And I think Trump is the kind of person who would know how to leverage his power. Because even the power that he himself has, which is like ratings in the, obviously he gets good ratings, right? And he knows how to use that as leverage. Like he did it with CNBC, right?
Yep.
He threatened to boycott it, and he's
like,
okay.
Here's the thing I think, just from deduction. So, maybe I take a wrong step, but here's the thing. He does know how to throw his weight around. I think he would do that. And for example, I love that he was one of the few people I've ever seen in this kind of environment say, when he was called on being bankrupt, it's, when you owe the bank $1,000, you're in trouble. When you owe them $1 million, the bank's in trouble. And so that's leverage. On the other hand, there's no way this guy gets these deals, because he's done a lot of deals. It's not like he builds all of these Trump towers. He works with contractors that sometimes are working for him. Sometimes the contractor might be having all the money, and he brings in other parties, or even just sells his brand. A guy that makes deals like that, he's not just belligerent. He also knows how to blow jobs when they have something he genuinely needs. When they've got the weight, he must know how to recognize that. And because if you push all the time, like some of these guys do, a lot of politicians actually are like this, you can't get away with it in business. You could be the pushy type. A lot of people like that. There's a certain point where it's like, oh wait, the ball's in that guy's court. Okay, I can't hide that I need him more than me. So we do something that makes him know I need you more than me, and we all get ahead. And so this is probably an unknown side of rationality, which is why I don't think you're going to have a Trump. He's not crazy.
Mm-hmm.
He's ordinary American crazy, probably at worst, maybe a little, ordinary narcissist American. And it doesn't, all of these personality traits, but I don't think he's going to nuke Russia because of those things. I don't think he's that crazy, or I don't think he would have the fantasies of going into Iraq and we're going to have flowers thrown at our feet.
But he strikes me as the type of guy who, when he makes a threat, if somebody doesn't acquiesce, I think he's the type of person who would feel the need to act on his threat. Like, he wouldn't be like Obama. Yeah. Remember when he threatened Assad, if you do this, we're going to go in, and he drew that red line in the sand. And
that's the part I don't know, because I think
Trump
he might be able to change.
I
think he might just change his story and back out of things. But where I agree with you that that's his personality type is that stuff I was talking about you wouldn't want to be Maureen Dowd and get on his wrong side or something. He will definitely crush people in the back rooms that cross him. And he's known for that, as far as what I've read too. And it comes across like, I would assume this, but people have reported it, but maybe, it's not fair. I don't know. But so with that caveat, that he hires, the management underneath him is, bootlickers or whatever. They're yes men. So that's a dangerous thing in government. The yes men network is like, people come up with crazy ideas. Like that's kind of where concentration camps and stuff is. The bootlicker of the bootlicker of the bootlicker that's still high in government has this crazy idea, and the whole bootlicking network is like, nobody has to admit, don't tell me, positive deniability and stuff. And so it is a very dangerous, like fascist kind of danger. You can fall into a fascist-like situation just from people just being a little bit disconnected with reality.
Yeah, and the other
I think.
thing that I think about is I try to think of like motives, right? Why would he run for president? And it can't be just for power because he's already, it can't be for money because he's already filthy rich, right? So I think he probably does have the best interest of America at heart, and I don't think he's trying to help his buddies either. It's just like he could do it that in so many different ways as being as rich as he is. So, I mean, that's kind of good, right? Because I think a less rich politician running for president might be driven more by money and personal power than Trump would. Is that, does that make sense, or am I off?
Oh yeah, I think that does make sense, and I think it's pretty clear. I mean, like if a Koch brother or a Walton were running for president, you might say they're trying to basically finalize their influence. You know, it was just too annoying to have to bribe these guys, and it doesn't always work. You know, and that's not going on with Trump. It's not even in the right business for that kind of thing to really be an issue.
Mhm.
He probably would love to make another $20 billion off of, you know, having interest, you know, Halliburton kind of interest in whoever builds the wall and stuff. I don't think he's above that, but the motivation has to be, yeah, not even power, but the fame, the mind power, mind share power.
You
I'm
think?
Trump. My
So
brand
you think
is the
helping,
whole idea.
you think helping the country, helping the working class, that's like at the bottom of his list of priorities in your opinion? Like to him, it's more about just the fame and the
Yeah, no,
status
I think it's
symbol.
the fame. But look, this has happened with a lot of politicians, including the politicians we have on the left that are kind of corrupt, but they want to be well loved and they want to be in the position of power. So by in pandering to what people want, they might do something good. Maybe people wanted something good. So I don't think it makes him disconnected with like the working class, especially because that's what I'm saying about who in our culture appreciates a guy that will just spit out dirty laundry no matter what. That's people watching, you know, I forget the who are the crazy, you know, I slept with my wife's mother shows, you know, the reality TV,
Jerry
Maury
Springer.
Povich,
Jerry
Jerry Springer,
Springer.
that's what I was trying to think of, you know, that he's in touch with the audiences of that.
Hmm.
And that politically, I mean, I don't have much of a respect for that community, but as it being in a bulk of people, and maybe as an elite liberal, I'm saying they're people. I just want them to be educated more about reality, you know. So whatever, he is talking to that, and the communication has got to be two-way. Right, he didn't grow up knowing that. He's tuned into that, and I think that's what he's getting off on. And I also think that he did want to improve his brand. I think it's a general thing, and I don't think he necessarily expected to be in the lead. That was not a necessarily a part of it. He'd sell a lot of books. He'd get another contract on his show. It's free promotion. He already flies around in the jet. You can get off the jet and people will be waiting there to hear what you have to say every time without any extra work or publicist or creating a reason. This is an ongoing reason for years in our system. And I think he probably just figured, well, that's a win-win. And now that he's gotten ahead, I think he's a little bit surprised, but he doesn't seem unprepared for it. It's
Well,
not like
my,
he doesn't act like he's surprised that he's ahead.
I
So
get,
he must have at least had some idea it could happen.
I guess I'm a little bit less cynical regarding his motives than you are. I think that it's more like he's so narcissistic, he's so full of himself that he actually thinks he is trying to get the fame and the notoriety and go down in history as one of the great presidents, but it's not, but it's going to be by making, because I think he firmly believes that he can make this country great again, right, and make it the #1 country in the world. And I think if he does that, then that will benefit him because it will feed his ego. He will go down in history as one of the greats. And I think that's what's in his mind. I think that is his motive. I don't think he's just looking to just get that title of president of the United States and then that's it. He's okay. I've accomplished it. Now I can just coast for the rest of my term. I don't think
Yeah.
that's really it, but who knows? Who knows what's going on in his
Well,
mind?
I mean, I was just doing my best to paint words on my thoughts of how he is. I mean, you did it in a more succinct way. I do think it's based on that narcissism. I think, but I think he genuinely likes this relationship of celebrity to the people that watch Celebrity Home. You know, like there's people still at the bottom that didn't get socialist, especially in the United States, to the bottom economically, right? Not in any other sense. And they celebrate wealth. And he likes being in touch with those people. You know what I mean? There's still people that are poor and oppressed that don't hate the king. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they do hate some of their politicians. They have their reasons. They don't have to love all of those powerful guys anymore. He knows how to tune into that and be the kind of rich big mouth they love. And he loves being
Right.
that.
And I think his tactic
And
would be
that's
to
actually a
convince
genuine
those.
part of it, is what I'm saying too. Like
And
that
I think
almost makes it seem like sweet.
he would try to convince those people that they can achieve, that he's trying to get for them what he achieved for himself or whatever. He's going to say, I'm going to get
Yeah.
these opportunities for you so that you guys can be just, and they'll buy it. They'll think that he's going to change the system in such a way where that will finally be possible. People buy it.
Right, and that's the part that's not possible because he doesn't know how to achieve things that way. I'm sorry, starting with $1 million loan and then getting $3 and $4 million here and there, it
And
does
he
not
probably
guarantee
lowballed
success.
that, I bet. I mean, he probably lowballed.
Well, yeah, it's funny because, well, the thing is, I read as far as what was revealed is a time when his dad went in, it was about to go bankrupt one of the times. He made his loan payments, and everybody was surprised, but it turns out that his dad went in, to the Trump casino, bought $3.5 million worth of chips or something, and then just left. It's like an interest-free, off-the-book loan, basically.
Wow.
And so fine, that's fine, but I'm just saying that will disconnect him from, well, how do you do this without that kind of backup?
Well,
because you can't go to not everybody can go to Wharton, and even if everybody goes to college, there's no $1 million loans to boost them off the ground with. I mean, I think I could boost myself pretty good with $1 million loan. I've done pretty good with a nothing loan. So
yeah, I just hope, my biggest fear, and I hope he's not like Ted Cruz, because Ted Cruz is the type of stubborn motherfucker who, like, he would allow the government to be shut down for years. I
right.
mean, if it meant like not giving in. Like, he's the type of guy who would just, like, it's either my way or the highway. Fuck compromise. We're doing it this way, and that's it.
Yeah.
He wants to just spend. He'll try to spend his entire term as president undoing everything that Obama did, as opposed to, putting forward new policies and.
I don't think it's because he really cares about each of those policies. Whatever policy Obama, and as a more liberal person than Obama, I see policies that Cruz should approve, and he'd probably keep his hands off of that because there'd be certain people tell him, no, that one's fine. This trade partnership's fine. Don't fuck with it. But I think it would be just kind of out of this weird idiot spite how to popular, like, it's a kind of narcissism that really is just about him, and the whole world could go to hell, and he could be the center of attention, and that'd be fine. And this again is where Trump, I was realizing, compared to Cruz is a perfect example. Everything on his playbook right now is because it's a pander thing. Every single thing is a pandering to a certain group.
Well, to his base.
Trump actually has more. Well, that's debatable, I agree, but let me just finish by saying I think Trump has more actual opinions. And, Trump's coming out saying things that are not the pander. I mean, for that matter, when he's saying we'll tax Ford cars when they come back into the country 30%, that's a tax. You know what I mean? That's not a purist going, I need to find out something mean to say about moving your cars out of the country without, and he's even clever enough to go, and the head of Ford, and as it happens, he's a really nice guy, but what are you going to do? And, it's like, that's the part you were saying where, and it's not all pushing his weight around. Sometimes he's like, one of the things, have you ever noticed he does this, for example, he'll sell something really, really rude and wrong and like out of the, can't prove it, and it'll go, I don't know, could be, I heard this.
Who? Which one?
Trump does that,
okay.
And it's like a softening thing. But anyway, so I think Trump is actually, this is the kind of thing I'm getting, but I think Cruz is particularly bad. Among the people that have this legitimacy as being a senator and stuff, he's the least statesman-like. I mean, he came after Obama for his birth certificate, and he's not born in the U.S. That tells you all. That's, if there was one thing that could tell you all in one step just how a person is able to think.
The thing with Cruz.
Anyway, go ahead. You got to interrupt me more, man. I talk a lot. You always wait. You got to interrupt me a little more. That'd be fine.
The thing
Go
with
for it.
Cruz is that even if hypothetically his ideas are 100% correct, right? Just everything he says is absolutely the right way to think. We should repeal Obamacare. We should undo all this stuff, right? Even if that's all completely 100% true and he really has all the best ideas, right? His strategy is not effective, okay? You have to negotiate your way into what
No,
you
wait.
ultimately
You're
think.
talking about Cruz, I guess.
Yeah, Ted Cruz. And I'm
Yeah, yeah.
hoping that I'm just hoping that Donald Trump is not as radical and as bullheaded as Ted Cruz, because I don't think Ted Cruz is a good negotiator. I think he's awful. I think it's always his way or the highway, and
Yeah.
it would just be 4 years of total deadlock with that guy.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, to me, this is where I think this is useful.
He
So,
has to
what does rational
compromise.
really mean? What's a rational really mean? Rational has to do with ratios. It goes back etymologically and still means comparing two things into a ratio. Like you have two things, that ratio is either going to be 2 or 1/2. 2 or 1/2. You know what I mean? If one is 2 and one is 1, it'll be 1/2, or the number 2. If it's 2 and 4, that's also 2 or 1/2. The ratio is just a matter of comparing things. By this definition, Trump is rational, but he believes his own intuition. And the intuitions and your sensibility, what it feels like's happening, is what you're actually comparing a lot of the times in my theory of how we actually think. And doing the comparison makes those emotions less emotional, because you're mixing two emotions and you get a little bit of a balance where emotion can be taken out. And if you're really good at being rational, you can really take out a lot of emotion. But a lot of things we do in our life, whether we stay with this person or not, they involve emotions. The rationality is actually in day-to-day affairs and some political diplomatic affairs, when somebody insults you from another head of state or something, still emotional. I believe Trump is rational in that sense. His intuitions are different from mine. He thinks that the Mexicans is a danger, and as we talked before,
Right.
I'm like, open the borders. But he takes his intuition and he compares it to another intuition, and might divide by 2 and go, so I don't invade. Whereas Cruz, I think, is irrational in the sense that, no, he just has a series of feelings. His motivation is, how can I plug in? My advisors are telling me to plug into a Tea Party thing. I could be the heir of that. Why is Trump getting that stuff? And even though he's being nice to Trump, which is part of that strategy. But you see, that's the lack of rationality. He's from one thing to the next. You can't stop him and have him compare two things.
Right, and that's the thing in politics, right? You have to compromise, because you're just
Yeah.
not going to get everything that you want right off the bat. You just can't, right? So you have to go baby steps, right? Instead of focusing on the differences and stuff and just harping on that, focus on the common ground. What do we agree on? Let's put that into law, and then we'll hash out these other differences. But he's the type of guy who will just stop the entire fucking process until he gets everything that he wants. That's what I sense from him, because he's that arrogant, that bullheaded. And I'm just hoping that Donald Trump is has a little more common sense than that, has a better negotiator than that.
I wanted to say that my sensation about Donald Trump is that he's kind of like the Wolf of Wall Street and the pink sheet penny stock guy, in that he and you notice it in his rhetoric and in his public appearances. He likes to either fuck you in the front end and then compliment you on the back end, or compliment you on the front end and fuck you in the back end. And I mean, he did it with Megyn Kelly. He does it across the board, and so he's got a real hump and dump. Come here, give me a hug, now get the hell out of here attitude. And I think that he is actually not the negotiator that you got. He's playing himself off to be. I think it's like any presidential candidate's book. It's his fluff deal. It's what he's trying to pass off as being this great negotiator. Not that I'm saying all of his policies are shit, but my sensation is that.
Yeah, I don't think he's a great negotiator. I think he's a deal maker and able to negotiate deals in the area, the industry that he is familiar with, which is, for example, the casino industry. Frank Luntz tried to spin him after the first debate as just a casino owner, not a capitalist. This is all metaphor work, right? So. And I was thinking, well, that'll probably work. And then Bernie came up with, I don't know if it's unrelated or gave him an idea, casino capitalism. And then, and at the time I was thinking, obviously Trump's just going to be one of these guys that's ahead for a few weeks, and then boom, it's on to somebody else. Same with Carson, and they're both holding longer, which is weird. But anyway, so at that time I'm thinking, yeah, that might be a way they delegitimize his wealth and the idea of the wealth worshippers. But then I realized casino capitalists aren't the worst thing. I mean, like in Nevada, I like the casinos. It's free drinks. They really take a very narrow margin. They know they're going to win. They sit back, they take their time winning, and they treat you like a king while you play. And it's a lot better than how I think the Koch brothers are treating the country. So, you know, maybe a casino owner isn't so bad. On the other hand, casino capitalism is bad. So I'm glad that that whole thing's in play. And I do think we have to give him credit for knowing how to negotiate building a new hotel somewhere. You know,
Yeah, I don't know how well that
that
translates into the actual into politics and
it doesn't.
foreign
I don't think,
policy, but
yeah,
yeah.
it doesn't. But like you were saying, it doesn't have to directly. You can have other people around him. It is possible to have, you know, that his craziness
Yeah,
or lack of
and
experience
I would
is used by the diplomats as a positive. So you never really know on that level. I mean, but he's
right.
not going to be negotiating the ultimate deal with internationally, but he's rational enough to know those people have money we need, these people have copper we need. He's rational enough to realize that. Whereas Ted Cruz is like, you know, he seems totally irrational. Rubio's to me is like there's just a flashlight inside of his head shining out his eyes. He's so vacant. Maybe he's just scared as a public speaker, but so you know. But those kind of people are actually. You know, we always talk about figureheads like it's a bad thing, but in reality, if you're going to be the president, you can't do all of those 3,000 jobs yourself, and those 3,000 jobs influence other things. You need a network of people. You need good. Not only do you need to know how to judge somebody's skills, you know, in an interview process, it's going to just be a month or something, but you actually have to already know a lot of the people that will be trying to apply. You know, there's no starting from zero. So,
well, I mean, I just hope
a figurehead like Rubio is really a coalition of people, some of which are economists, some of which are bankers, some of which are in this industry and that industry, and they don't want the economy to collapse. So, you know what I'm saying? There's actually some safety in that like we don't get in Trump, because in Trump, he's not beholden to anybody. Okay, well, there's 350 million people here, so how's he going to be beholden to them?
I just hope that if he does end up winning, which I think is becoming a more and more likely prospect as time goes on, just given the field of candidates. I mean, Jesus Christ. And Ben Carson as a young earth creationist, good fucking grief. Oh my God. Anyway, so I just hope that if he does get elected, that now that he will be privy to all of the information that, you know, his Secretary of Defense has, that all his advisors have, right? He won't say such stupid shit anymore. Like, he'll feel like, oh, okay, I didn't know that. Now, well, okay. Because then at least now he's going to have more information, right, to go by. And I'm hoping that'll
you mean when he's actually elected?
Yeah, if he were actually elected.
Well, you know, his book, The Art of the Deal, talks about this. He says very clearly in that book, you know, I've just read excerpts, so I'm not saying I've read the book, just to be clear. But, and you can see this in his style, being hyperbolic about things people dream about is a part of salesmanship. And he considers it an honest kind of distrust, right? So, for example, let's imagine he uses this in the Mexican thing. He really thinks we should build a wall and that it's a good thing. And, you know, he's a little bit of a nationalist, and the bigger the wall, then the more, you know, where the nation starts. You know, that could be honest, but really he knows that other people think that. And then so he pours on top of that, oh, we're getting raped and whatever. You know, you got to have a cherries on top. And so, you know, that I don't like that style, but it does imply that, you know, yeah, when push comes to shove, he you know, he's going to be more reasonable. And again, as far as the unintended possible consequences, you know, usually it's like you have a civil rights thing and a conservative president, you have welfare reform and a liberal president. There's a reason and cover, and you never know. Trump could easily come in and reform immigration, have the trust of the Tea Party to do so, and basically let everybody in and open the borders like I want. I mean, it's not, or
but
something,
see,
you know, like that, because
that's the way a lot of, like, common folks think, right? They think that, well, they seem to think that we live in some sort of dictatorship where you just elect Trump and just some guy who's apparently has all the answers, and then he'll just fix everything. They don't understand that our system doesn't work that way. He has to somehow convince Congress to work together to, you know, write these bills that he can then sign into law. But I don't know how good of a negotiator he is. I don't know how well he can get those people to come together.
You're not even the dictator in your own administration. You're not even the dictator. You run a business, right? Were you a programmer to do that business, or did you just doing this web? Okay, but you also run a business. You said you had employees. Then you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, you have the right to fire them, and a lot of people will react like that's ultimate power over them when you're talking to them, but it's not really ultimate power over anybody. And people that do a good job or whatever will feel brave. You don't just say it and it happens. You have to be clever and think of, oh, Jesus, they're just not getting it. Okay, maybe if I ask Susan to do this and John to do that, they'll get in and it'll work together, and then we'll have a meeting and also see how that works. You know, you have to trick the people that work for you into really doing what you as the person actually knows has to be done. Just
to a certain extent, yeah. I try not to hire people who are like that seem difficult, or have a history of being difficult,
or being stupid or anything else. But still figuring. Let's say you have a creative new idea that they haven't done, and you're trying to get them to do it. At the very least, it's not a matter of do it this new way. You have to convince them. Your ability to convey on the whiteboard what you're trying to say, you have to. It has to be real.
Right.
You know, if you can't talk in a way they can listen to, it won't happen. And so, you know, so that's the thing about, you know, you hire a Trump, who he would hire is just as important as his personality. Because you can't have a president micromanaging the executive office. You know how many things they keep track of? That's just not going to work. So
it'll be interesting when he actually picks a running mate, if he actually wins the nomination. Can you imagine him with Ted Cruz?
Well, Ted Cruz seems to be angling for that a little bit. I thought he's just been one of the
disaster that would be.
I don't see Trump really liking Ted Cruz.
I hope not.
I think he would take Rubio. He's been really pat on the back to Rubio several times. He's nodded his head while Rubio was answering, and he's smart enough to know that basically Rubio is valuable theoretically as a Hispanic, and that's about it. And he's handsome or whatever. He looks good in a photo. Well, this is important, actually. I mean, people can't, you know, like with Bernie, I don't know if people are ready for that kind of style as a president. You know, so, and it's not an unreal thing that people vote in the last minute. You know, arbitrary things like that are definitely, you know, going on. So,
it will be interesting.
But he seems to have been real friendly to Rubio in a lot of ways. And then he said Rubio and Bush don't really like each other. And then when they were fighting in the last debate a little bit back and forth, if you could hear, Trump was like, see, told you. And yet he's been nice to Rubio. So again, in the whole Trump world, who's on my side, who's not on my side, who's love-hate ambiguous, we're trying to do a deal kind of thing, like a board game or something. I see him setting himself up to, you know, he hasn't insulted Rubio in a way that he can say, this is the one I like, he's going to be on me. So I would think he would try to choose somebody traditional, and his advisors would at least tell him that, because, okay, you're a reality star, hey, you know, movie actors can win, you can win. This is going to work, but it's a good time to really not get a Rubio, but go ahead and let, you know, a Kasich or someone that's been around and has, you know, a Biden type person, in that second slot can add this sort of legitimacy without subtracting from you trying to sell your Trump brand.
I think it's pretty safe.
Think he would lose in the general. All the polls, you know, the general polls right now, and who knows what would happen, but you know, he loses against Bernie or Hillary nationwide. So
he's currently losing to Hillary and Bernie currently nationwide?
Yeah, just on the thing here. So I'm just on Real Clear Politics. They keep up with them. So I haven't checked for a week or so, but
well, check that out, Piero. I was going to ask Vic whether or not how do you feel about Trump? Because I heard a speech where he was talking about the EPA, and he basically said he wants to reel them back or audit them or slow them down because they're stopping trade and so forth. And I know you run a business, and I know you probably lean to the right, but I was just curious of how you feel about the negative critiques of capitalism trying to streamline over the environment or something to that.
Well, actually, your suspicion would be a bit misplaced. I'm not. I'm more of a centrist. I don't really. I don't. I would identify as an independent. I'm not affiliated with either party. Um, but yeah, I mean, I do get hammered for sure with taxes. That's for sure. So whenever I hear a politician talking about cutting taxes, it does. I gotta say, it does. It certainly would help me. Um, As far as the EPA is concerned, it doesn't really affect my business at all, so I don't really have a strong stance on that.
So,
But government programs, in general, depending on the government program, I mean, there's a lot of government programs that I think are just wasteful and just poorly run, and that's the thing. That's the problem that I have with like socialism, because socialism sounds good to me on paper, right? It sounds nice if there were one, put it all under one central government and they just handle all the essentials, right? Sounds great if that could actually work in practice, right? If there was a track record of government handling that type of thing efficiently and effectively. But we don't see that. And I actually used to be a contractor that worked for the government, right? So I used to see firsthand the amount of waste that happens in the government, where people would fund stupid projects, like really expensive projects, just to fill up their quota, right? So that they can ask for the same amount of money next quarter, right? Because if they don't make that, if they don't spend all their money, then the next time when they go to, get the next round of funding or whatever, they won't get as much funding the next time. So they just spend it on bullshit. And it's
and there's
horrible.
no accountability. If there was
Right.
accountability or that failed, then no. But it's like, oh, not everything works.
If
Yeah, I
there
see the
was
same thing.
better independent oversight, right, then I think it might work, but we don't have that, right? So it's just like all these ideas, they sound great on paper, but just I just don't see the track record of the government doing anything really well, to be honest. So
There's some examples. I mean, like when I worked for NASA when I was young, I found the opposite because you're buying everything from the government supply stores. You're buying pens that last for years for 25 cents, because you see what it costs off of your budget, you know, and and they make their own office supplies that are better and cheaper than other, and blind people make them, and so in a way, I'd almost say the Department of Defense, even though when the scandal came out of $200 hammers, the DoD, they sort of were the focus of that, and there's definitely truth of that. In certain areas of aerospace research and stuff, there's just ridiculous billion-dollar wastage. But then you get into something that has a lot of link up with your typical Fed worker like NASA, and our cabinets were from the 50s because they were made out of steel or tin or whatever it was, and they're still they look like they're more or less brand new, a few scratches, and we're using it seemed pretty efficient actually. So it is possible for a government organization to save money and be more efficient because they can save money when they're buying supplies as a unit or even make their own supplies, but it doesn't really happen. It's not happening now. I agree too. I've also seen, and also know from the news, but I've seen as a government worker, this is a thing a president could actually step in on, is that this whole, when you don't spend your money, you lose it. You don't spend your money, then you lose it. It goes back to the Treasury, and you lose that for next year too. That's ridiculous. That obviously motivates people to keep pumping it up, when what they should be doing is like, yeah, normally this department costs $20 million. This year, because of what we did last year, it's going to be $20 million, and we get a gold star and an extra $10 million next year. And if we don't use it, we start to have, I mean, it's like that motivation would be better. And there's a million little things like that that are actually so obvious to people that have worked in it. I think. I mean, it's not uncommon.
Now, going back to Michael's question about the EPA, like I said, I'm kind of like torn on the issue because, well, no, I mean, I'm actually in favor of a lot of what the EPA does, right? I'm definitely one of those forward-looking people who looks for green technologies, just everything forward, forward, forward. Um, you know, electric cars, all that stuff, pollution regulation, all that stuff, right? Um, but at the same time, you do have to be somewhat realistic. You have to recognize that some of these policies are negatively affecting businesses, which does affect. I mean, I guess there just has to be a balance, I suppose. It can't be too stringent, too over the top. There has to be some sort of compromise, I think, that leans in the direction, of course, of green technologies, but doesn't completely shut out things like coal and stuff. Because
Or what about
a lot of
nuclear?
that
I mean,
industry is
nuclear.
going over to China. They're benefiting from it, and and we don't get anything out of it. So I don't know.
Michael, do you want to respond to that? I wanted to take an asterisk here about the polls, and I also wanted to talk about some stuff related to what you just said, but with the EPA. But you want to go?
I'll jump in. I mean, I agree with you. I was simply going to throw out the idea of whether or not either of you two guys think that if Trump gets the nomination, whether or not he is going to attempt to deal with the left in some drastic, like, let's give the left this. If you guys vote for me, I'll give the left that. I just didn't know if you thought, like, hey, if he's a dealer, then let's see how he deals with the left. But
Well, he's been on the left.
That's a big open question, in my opinion, and that's what we've been talking about. Actually, it's like, how would he conduct himself if he were actually elected?
See, I think overall he'd
would
be
he be like a Cruz? Would he be like a Ted Cruz? I don't think Ted Cruz would work very well at all.
He'd be moderate. He'd be moderate. He'd be a moderate person. The danger with him is he gets some kooky ideas. Like $1 trillion walls is actually kind of kooky, and that those things can have really big negative consequences. You know what I mean? But I think overall, it's not like, we're not talking concentration camps and stuff like that. So hey, I wanted to say this. I didn't find all the polls right now seem to be primaries, and because they're coming up. The last national head-to-head I saw is this October 19, CNN, and Clinton was up 5 against Trump, Sanders up 9, though Carson beats Sanders and Clinton, but just like by a point in the same poll. So that's weird.
I'm actually a little bit less concerned about the national polls. I'm more concerned about like the polls in all of those swing states. Who's leading those swing states currently?
That's where Sanders has a problem. He's not as he has problems there in those kinds of states. The ones that are slightly red, or even any of those actually, the Ohio's and stuff. Clinton can come across with her, I like war credentials, and I like my hair wild. Bernie is gonna have trouble sweet talking those guys, but it could be done. And also, even in those states, I mean, for Bernie to win, it's one, the opponent, but the other thing is all of the all the eligible voters that don't vote. If you pull out a Jesse Ventura and get those people to vote, that can be 20% of electric. If you use Twitter or something, if you successfully get those guys out, they just have to show up on this one day. That could overcome even in those purple states, because he's not, unless if the other guy doesn't pull out a bunch of their non-voters, then you have 50% of the non-voters are eligible for your side of things or whatever. However it works, nobody really knows the philosophical demographics of this weird group of people. But so anyway, there's that. And I was going to say, look, I'm for the EPA, but here's an example. The anti-nuclear thing has been ridiculous. That has been a knee-jerk reaction.
Is that hysteria all because of Japan?
No, not at all. Because they basically stopped building them in the U.S. back in the 70s and 80s, and it's the crying Indian thing and this kind of thing. And we should stop building those kinds of plants they were building, but we actually stopped research. This is the nuclear plants we have now, even if they were built recently, are essentially the first model ever invented, and it's dangerous. And there's so many more. They have many designs of nuclear reactors that cannot melt down. I mean, somebody
Well,
could always hit them with a plane.
not just fission though, but also fusion. Like I mean, I've seen many TED
Well,
Talks that have been saying that fusion is pretty much right
yeah,
around the corner, and the only thing stopping it is politics. It's like,
yeah,
you
I
know,
don't believe that.
you don't
It
buy it.
is around the corner, but see, it's been around the corner since the 80s when I went to college. And
I
I
mean,
went to physics. I went to physics classes, at
they
Berkeley,
have
and it was
done
around the
it.
corner.
I mean, they have built it, right? And
They
they've
haven't
become
made energy off of
the
it.
technology is there, right? The problem is that it's not as efficient. It costs a lot. It costs a lot more money
Yeah,
to produce the reaction than you
yeah.
get out of it. So,
Right, but I'm
uh,
talking
but
about
they've become a
product.
lot more efficient in recent years. Like
They
it
just had
efficient
a
to the
proof,
point where
yeah.
it's doable.
They had a net positive reaction, but the containment facility and all the magnets and all of that took so much power. They've never had it produce energy. The thing about fission is we've had it produce energy. The
Mm-hmm.
thing about fission is that uranium is a really stupid fuel to use for that. Right? You also don't want solid rods. This current design, you have 90% of the nuclear energy in the rods, in the uranium rods, is still in the uranium rods when they have to get stored. That's why they last. That's why they're wasted forever. There's other kinds of reactors that have been built, right?
Mm-hmm.
At Oak Ridge and places, specifically fluid salt reactors. If you dissolve the metal in salt, where you get 100% of that. I mean, if you made a liquid reactor, and keeping in mind it has nothing to do with table salt, right? Salts is basically any chemical. When acids and base get together and do their thing, what's left over is salts, basically. So there's all kinds of salts, so like a fluoride salt or whatever. And you dissolve the metal in this, you can actually, all the waste they were going to put at Yucca Mountain, you can burn that. That's still fuel.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's just the kind of reactors that have been built at some of our nuclear facilities in the past, as research, and some nations are building these kinds of things now, finally. And actually, we have the U.S. has a deal with China where they're working on a liquid thorium reactor over in China. But
What's
there's
your
also
opinion?
ideas that haven't been done where basically I'll just say this one, if you have a laser, you can point that laser at a really tiny chunk of uranium, the kind of chunk of uranium, it just be a chunk. Like if it fell to the ground, you'd have a guy with a suit go pick it up. If it melted, you have a guy with a backhoe go pick up the whole area. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And with the laser, you can basically bleed off as much energy as you want from that thing. The process powers the laser, and it's not only is it safe, but you could put something like that in the back of a van. But they haven't made that as far as successfully that actually generates energy. But there's all this spectrum of stuff, and so obviously there's an ecological reactionary that doesn't realize that no, we need something like thorium. I mean, that would reduce carbon footprint. If we had finished nuclear, which I wouldn't have wanted to do with this reactor type, but if we'd done, probably we would have got the new reactor types, right? Because the whole thing was suppressed. Then we would not have. We might not even have this global warming. The whole world could have done it back in the 50s.
Oh, well, speaking of global warming, I've already seen some studies that say it's already pretty much too late. There's no way to reverse it. But
Whatever.
it's funny. I did see a really cool invention recently where they have a device that they've built that can actually suck CO2 and pollution and stuff out of the atmosphere. So you can actually put it in a smog-filled city, like let's say Detroit or something, and you can actually, over the course of months or years, you can actually suck all of the pollutants out of the air. Now, if you do that en masse all around the world, who knows what we could do? I don't know. But that's really promising. But anyway, no, I was going to ask you a question though about how promising do you think Solar City is? Where you got solar panels and have that fuel a bunch of battery cells, and you kind of disconnect from the grid like we traditionally have, and every house, every building is self-sufficient. They have their own battery packs in the basement or whatever, and they're replenished through solar panels, and there you go. nice clean energy. And I don't know how well that scales, but it
Yeah.
seems really promising. I know Elon Musk is pretty excited about it, and
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
I think the problem right now is in the manufacture of those, whether it really makes sense. It matters a lot how often you have to replace machinery,
That's true.
and it's a pretty toxic thing. I think my deal with solar is that, like in Hawaii, a lot of people were having solar. Some critics say it's just because of the subsidies and stuff, but whatever, that's kind of true with the upfront cost. But I saw people that had no bill and were selling electricity back with ordinary homes, in the town with, the fridge and all the two washers and all this, hot water heater, the whole deal. But I think it's kind of, it's on the side thing. Like, for example, there's places in Nevada, at least there used to be, where you drive across, it was like 250 miles to the next place. Well, if you have electric cars and with solar panels, you just put some solar panels out there, and you always have a gas station, and it could be for free or not for free, and so somebody would certainly do that. I also think Musk has that tube idea, and he did the math that if you went, whether they're hard to produce or not, in this case doesn't matter. This is so useful. If you run the solar panels all along the tube, like a San Francisco to LA tube, at the car tube his company designed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that you get enough power to power the tube from the panels, and you're not, a power line that falls down isn't going to depower the whole thing, right? So it's a great design. So things like that. But I seriously think the answer of energy is
They're
already
actually
here,
building the
and
Hyperloop.
it's nuclear.
They're actually building the Hyperloop. Like,
There's somebody building a test, like a couple mile long test section. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. I mean, I think
Musk is awesome for our
I think they said it
techno-utopia.
goes like, I think it said like 600 miles an hour or something. That could get
That's
us
what it's
from
supposed to in the design,
East Coast to West Coast in like a couple of hours or something.
Yeah, and the idea is you'll drive your car into a pod, and the pod goes there. How awesome is that?
Oh,
That's
really?
changing our life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Plus,
That's awesome.
well, if he has his way,
I thought it was more like
a,
like a subway or something. Wow, that's awesome.
no, yeah.
That's so
And
cool.
and it's cheap. It's cheaper than what. I read the white paper enough, and I'm not a mechanical engineer, but I could see that this was not just made up stuff, and it comes out a lot cheaper. So even if it was twice as much as they think to build, or the research was more expensive than they thought before they get the knowledge to build it cheap, this high-speed rail that goes 200 miles an hour in California is like trillions of dollars. So Musk is awesome for this. This guy, I hope he just keeps going and keeps going, because he's going to give us, space odyssey technology at real prices where people can use it. And it's too bad this Model X came out so expensive, but whatever. He's building a quality car. I think that's the way to do it, and obviously the prices can come down. So. And I think the answer, though, is really simple. Have I never pitched all this thorium stuff to you? Because all we need is liquid salt with thorium as the fuel. And the thing about thorium is it's not as radioactive as uranium, but when you walk around to the dirt or to some into the mountains and you see some exposed granite, if you take your Geiger counter, there'll be some clicks. Those clicks are generally from thorium and a few other radioactive things, but thorium has a very slow half-life, so you can hold the thorium in your hand. You can hold the solid golf ball size pound of thorium in your hand, and it's not going to burn you or anything, because really you need to get the reaction going. Once you get it going, then there's a chain reaction. Once you cause one thorium to fizz, it puts off a neutron, and then it causes its own reaction. So and if you dissolve it in liquid, including if you had a uranium reactor, but then you're not going to have a meltdown because you don't have a pile of rods that are in control of their own temperature. It's a hot fluid. And if it gets too hot, you have solid plugs, like made also of salts, that at a certain known temperature are for sure going to melt. So if it starts to overheat, this stuff all dumps into a pan. And so you can't always have it's radioactive. If somebody hit it with a plane, you might get some radioactive in the air. But you're going to get it in a way that you can clean up. It isn't melted down into the water table or anything like that. And I think that's the answer. And it's really amazing, too, in the sense that just a few highlights is the amount of energy an American uses right now in their whole life is about a golf ball size chunk of thorium. right? And there is way more thorium than uranium. And uranium, most of the uranium is no longer fissible. It's wore out, you know, it's radioactive, and so you have to get out the 4% of uranium. So you get the uranium out of the dirt, and then that's why you have to spin it, because the only difference is one has a little bit heavier nucleus, so you got to use a centrifuge, and it takes forever because you're just talking about it's like 1 neutron heavier or 5 neutrons heavier or whatever. Okay, so you have to refine it. Where the thorium, it's all fissible. And furthermore, when they do the rare earth, and this actually wraps around into what you were saying about EPA issue, when you go get these lithium and these heavy metals that they're using in our phones now for the earbuds and everything, if you follow that, these rare earths, so-called rare earths, thorium is one of the things you get as a byproduct of mining that. Right? And rare earth means it's actually everywhere. Rare means that you don't find chunks of it. It means that in a pound of dirt, there's a quarter ounce or whatever. And maybe some places it's a whole ounce, some places it's a tenth of an ounce, because it'll deposit, you know, it deposits in oceanic sands. There's a lot of thorium dissolved in the ocean, so there's certain kinds of clays and sands that'll build up thorium.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's everywhere, but now we don't mine the rare earths over here. They wanted to in California again, and I think they should. And the EPA, it should not be a not in my backyard. Anything that we use in this country, we ought to be willing to get in this country if it's available, which it all is, all these minerals, just about everything. And if it's hard or dangerous, we have to figure that out. If we use fracking oil, if we use fracking gas, we should be willing to frack in our own country. If we don't, then we could say, no, we don't want the gas gotten that way. We consider it destructive of the environment. I think fracking is ridiculous because you're never going to fix the fucking water table. You break the water table, it's broken forever, and there is no fixing it. So it's ridiculous to play breaking up the water table, in my view. Yeah. Which is what that does. You can't crush rock arbitrarily underground, at least not until you get a 3D picture of what's under there. You know, it's important. Those water tables are hugely important to us.
Well, hang on, Piero. Hang on. Go ahead, Liz.
We need more Elon Musks in the world. But I just posted a link in the chat there. I don't know if you've heard of him, but there's this like Indian guy. His name is Manoj Bhargava. He's like a billionaire. And I don't know if you've seen that trailer, Billions in Change.
I love it. It's amazing.
He's amazing. He's an amazing person.
Cool. I'm going to watch it.
He's like an Elon Musk, basically. And, you know, he's completely selfless. Everything that he does. In fact, I think he plans to give away like 99% of his wealth to charity once he dies. And he's a multi-billionaire. And he has this company where he's not in it. He doesn't want to create anything cool, anything that makes him look cool. He wants to create things that bring everything forward, everybody forward. And he's actually, they've invented this. I mean, there's a lot of invention. If you look at the trailer, actually the whole movie's already out, actually. So you can watch it. I haven't watched it yet.
So is this a Chinese guy?
No. He's like Indian, I think.
Indian. There's the Chinese guy. Did you see the guy where they had that time lapse of the building? They built like 3-story building in 2 weeks. Did you ever see that? That was
That's
viral.
amazing. I have seen that. Yeah.
The guy that runs that, he kind of inherited communist country, but anyway, inherited like an air conditioning business. He's really clever. There's also some people 3D printing. I mean, there's a lot of clever stuff going on in this area. I think the Chinese in general are very clever about, is there a way to use this cheap? But that particular guy, because he's kind of like Elon, it struck me as the Elon thing, which is like, not did I just figure out how to do this quick and cheap, but it's a green building. Mm-hmm. It looks good. It's got smart windows. You know, it's a cool thing. It's like what I was saying, Space Odyssey. You know, we want our future now. Everything but the leotards, I want it. And you know, I don't want it to be crap. I want it to be cheap. It's so cheap that everybody can have it. And yet, I'm in the future. And I think that guy, I forget his name, but he struck me as a positive influence.
Yeah, I mean, these people, this guy in particular, is a role model. I mean, to me, this guy's a total role model. In fact, maybe it's a really short trailer. It's only 3 minutes. If you want, you can just play it so people can see it.
The sound doesn't come through.
Oh, it doesn't?
No, there's a plug-in, but it doesn't work in the live Hangout. So you can't hear that, right?
Yeah. Well, Yeah, check it out. I mean, he's got a desalinization idea that's just fabulous.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my
Oh, I'd like
favorite
to
as
see
well,
that.
as well as his energy.
Because I have my own desalinization ideas, so I'll be interested in
And
that.
I
What's his
love and I like that
desalinization
other
idea?
one. There's this other one thing that he built. It's like this standing cycle, you know, one of those like standing bicycles or whatever, where for parts in the world where there's no electricity or there's like sporadic electricity, all you got to do is sit in this thing for an hour pedaling, and that's enough to charge this battery cell that powers your entire home for an entire day. Isn't that awesome? So that means you could technically, you know, get yourself a good 1 hour workout, and then you have power for the rest of the day in your home. That is
See,
amazing.
yeah, that's what I think about solar. See, I think ideas like that are great. We need to augment our energy that way, and it'll be all good. And we, in our personal life, will benefit from that. And then for the grid that needs to work, whether it's sunny, whether you exercise that day or not, it's there for the, you know, it's our safety net. But we can get a lot of things for free power. You know, depending how much you drive your car, yes, you're going to be able to get free power through the solar panels.
Well,
You know?
he's referring to third world countries, like very
Right.
despot populations
Right.
that don't have a reliable grid. I mean, if you look at the grid in India, I mean, they're still using.
No, I'm saying that if people have a reliable grid, they should still save the energy out of their bicycle. Anyway,
That last
this
link
energy is
that
all useful. Do you know how much energy we could use? Think about it. If we had super cheap energy, and with the advent of finally good batteries and electric motors that can, you know, move a train, we're getting to that point, then, I mean, if there's no limit, you know, everything's free if you have energy. If you have enough energy, there's no issue about desalinization. It just takes energy. So many things. As a matter of fact, flying cars. If you had enough energy, you know, and it would light enough to power, you know, a 200 fans, you could make a flying car right now, be totally safe.
That's the whole idea behind Iron Man and the Tesseract, right? He's got
So,
that
yeah.
little Tesseract, and he could basically power that suit, and that does practically everything because he's got unlimited power, basically. But anyway,
Yeah, and
that
so I mean,
second
so
link
anyway,
that
that's
I
all I'm saying.
posted.
So if we save all of our power from every kind of source, you know, they're having power now that's your body heat and stuff will power your heart, you know, your heart machine, or maybe just something on your shirt. I think using that kind of power is just almost design-wise an important part of the energy solution.
Yeah, that second link that I posted is the full documentary. The first one is the trailer, and the second one is the full. It's like a 43-minute documentary.
Cool, I'll watch that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I need to check that out too. So anyway, I think we talked about.
Oh, we lost Mike.
Yeah. So, what do you think about Donald Trump using Paul Ryan as his running mate? I think that would make a pretty compelling ticket because, you know, Paul Ryan is no dummy. You know, he seems like a pretty smart cookie, at least when it comes to like economics. And
I don't know. I mean, do you know how divisive he is? Like, I really hate him. But I'm not saying he's a dummy, but I don't like him. He's like, you know, he's better than Cruz, but I don't know.
I just like smart people, and
I think he's kind of divisive. I don't buy. I mean, I don't necessarily want to get into it, but I don't buy that he's that smart. But I do believe he can get an A in a class. But I think he's pandering to illusions a lot more.
Well, I mean, supposedly Ted Cruz is a genius, and he got like, I don't know, you know, 1,600 SAT. I don't know. He apparently he did very well in school and stuff. But clearly, that guy, it's clearly intelligence is not a metric for how good you are as a leader if you have good ideas.
Like, yeah, there's this kind of pandering, and where do you get your ideas? Sure, you have intelligence. Sure, you can answer the test questions because that's what was put before you. But how do you go about getting your own ideas? Do you use that intelligence, or is it just what grandma said, or is it just what your donor said, or is it just something you thought might work out of the random? You know, you don't know where it comes from. But speaking of that, what about Carson? Because he's an interesting person in that he actually, the way he talks conveys he must be stupid.
Have you
know right off he can't be stupid and be a neurosurgeon? What's going on there?
Right, and apparently he's like an exceptional neurosurgeon because I don't know if there's actually a documentary I think on HBO on Ben Carson.
There's a movie, a famous movie that was actually about him that I always forget the name of.
Okay, or maybe it wasn't maybe it is a movie. Maybe
no, there's both. There's all of the above. His fame came from getting recognized as an African American surgeon that was really good, I think. So, but anyway, I didn't mean to
but I don't
think
that obviously doesn't. I don't think that necessarily translates into being a good politician or a good leader. Just because you know neurosurgery. You're smart in neurosurgery. I mean, clearly he's not smart enough to realize that his young Earth creationism is retarded, right?
Yeah, so but that's what I'm saying.
Stop
Even
him
forget
from-
presidency. Isn't this he's in the public eye? It's a weird thing, right? How could that be? I mean,
I don't know.
because
I have
there's
no
so
idea.
much scientifical, logical reasoning on the way to understanding what you have to understand just to be any kind of surgeon. And again, I don't mean mathematical necessarily, but this vessel plugs to this, and you can unattach this and clamp it, but you can't unattach that and clamp it. And here's why. And if you're doing something new that's never been done before, you have to know those principles. And then he's a brain surgeon, which absolutely is one of the most careful things, where there's a lot of logic involved and not going the wrong way, not
and science and a
and yet he
scientific
can't
mind.
figure out that you know, and he has this option that a lot of scientists have of like, there's nothing that says literal about the Bible. That 6,000-year-old thing, you know, it comes from like 20 generations from Adam to Abraham, maybe, and then or Moses, and then Moses to someone. You know, it's like there's no real thing in there that says, and this was all 20 of them, and they lived 700 years, and it doesn't really say. There's nowhere that it says it has to be 6,000 years. It's very legit to say that God created the universe. What we see in evolution, everything else, is how he created it.
Mm-hmm.
Why would a scientific-minded person stick to
whatever brainwashing they did to him when he was younger? It must have been pretty fucking powerful stuff. I mean, they must have been hammering that shit into him for years. For it to be so resilient.
Yeah, I would hate to, you know, I don't want to let myself become one of the, you know, too much just, you know, casting aspersions that really shouldn't be. But I mean, to me, it does look like it was. To me, it looks like it was beat into him a little bit.
There's no way he arrived
at. This is why he became a good.
There's no way he arrived at the conclusion through logical means or rational, through introspection. So it had to be. And he had to be indoctrinated with.
So did he do it to himself though? Because the story he says is that he was pretty violent, bad kid, and he got in some kind of trouble at one point and realized, maybe in juvie or maybe not, I forget what it was, that, and that's how he went to God and decided to be calm all the time.
But how does that translate to young Earth creation? I mean, that might translate to becoming a Christian or believing in some sort of God. But how would that translate to young Earth creationism?
I don't know. Maybe it was the chick track he read when the moment happened or something. So yeah, I don't know. It's bizarre though. It's definitely bizarre.
It's so
I'm not surprised for them to believe in God, but to be so fundamentalist about it is surprising.
And it's disappointing too, because it just shows. I mean, what a huge problem. Because even really intelligent people can be duped in this way, and
it shows it's not about intelligence.
No,
really.
I know,
like,
right?
It's
discouraging because it would be easier, right, if we could just convince ourselves that it is just a matter of ignorance, where you can just teach them the correct information, and then boom, they'll just dispel their stupid myths. But no, it's actually not that. This is like a psychological thing going on with them, that some sort of psychological barrier in their brain where they like close off their logical faculties for this particular subject. It's so bizarre.
Well, if you're talking about possible like kinds of abuse, physical or mental, but mainly physical, that happens.
Yeah.
So it might be a sign of that, the compartmentalization, and the part that learned brain surgery was the part he was protecting from the part that needed God to go on living or something. I don't know. It's bizarre, and I think it's interesting about what intelligence really means, because I always do try to say that intelligence by someone's views. You'd be surprised. I mean, nobody really believes the flat Earth thing, as far as I know. But let's say people do. Let's say people do, because there's definitely ideas. You'll find one that's actually smart, but for some reason he's like, yeah, but, you know, on that subject, and, you know, I mean, it happens to me all the time.
Oh, yeah, there are conspiracy
you run into somebody seems totally same, and then boom, some weird thing comes out.
There are conspiracy theorists who are brilliant, right? They're like maybe even geniuses, and they believe in the most outlandish ideas, right? Like 9/11 being an inside job, the moon landing was a hoax. You know,
anything being smart means you can be more crazy. So I think this is a lesson we should all take about ourselves too. You know, don't think your intelligence makes you sane, because if you're really intelligent, you can write a really long argument that convinces you of something you don't actually know. So, and I'm sure that's what he's
I don't know if you watch Star Trek Voyager. Have you ever seen Star Trek Voyager?
No, I saw the original and the Next Generation, then I kind of fallen off. I
Okay.
think I saw a little bit of Voyager. It was the woman captain one, right?
Yes. So there was an excellent episode of that kind of ties into the whole conspiracy theory thing. Well, there's this character on Star Trek Voyager. Her name is Seven of Nine. She's an ex-Borg, right? And she's a genius, like super, super genius, well, probably one of the smartest people on that ship, right?
Mhm.
And something happened in her cortical implant that caused her to have all these conspiracy theories, to be extremely worried and conscientious of everything, and just constantly just like paranoid about everything, right? And she would concoct these elaborate theories about like the captain is actually working for the Maquis or some bullshit like that. I mean, just really
Right.
outlandish ideas, right? But they all made sense because she was taking all this
Yeah.
like circumstantial evidence and piling it together. And she created a convincing story that was convincing other people in the crew, right? And she firmly believed it, and other people in the crew, because she gave them the evidence and it seemed compelling, and they believed it too. And the moral of that episode was that you can be really intelligent, you can have a lot of evidence, but you can pretty much use that evidence to come up with all sorts of theories that are completely
Yeah.
preposterous. And you can
Yeah.
you can present them in such a way where it kind of makes sense, and you can actually fool
Right.
people into
Well, they're
believing
not
that.
completely preposterous, but what it goes is from one guess to the other. I mean, what I notice happens is there's controversial things about, like, did this person meet with that person, or did that person meet with this person? Or to get, like, did Anita Sarkeesian give herself death threats? That would make sense. People sometimes do that, and then they go,
Yeah.
you know what? I think she did.
Right.
Boom. Then they're to the next step. Maybe there's a
Right.
chance that she did, but even so, they're to the next step. And if you make a 3 of those and you multiply out the ratio of being right, it's easy to ignore that. Okay,
Exactly.
you know what? You've got a good theory, but if you track the odds on every step, it's a 1 in a million. But it could be true, and sometimes the 1 in a million is true. But so it's
Right.
things like that. And I've noticed in my own life, you have to really well, you sort of have a vibe that is the remedy to that, where you just, once you start to be sure there's this incredible complex thing, okay, just step back, man, mellow out, take a breather. You got something else to do that. Stop.
Right.
Don't obsess about it. You got to,
I always just
really
look at
are
the
aiming for
likelihood
you.
of it. To me,
But
I'm always I'm just looking at the likelihood of it. I put those two hypotheses. I'm looking at two competing hypotheses, right? And one it's like strains credulity. It would require so much collusion. There's so many moving parts of this idea, right? That the likelihood of this being true is just so remote. Yeah, it's conceivable. It's possible.
Well, do you know
Theoretically,
about
but
gang
the
stalking?
likelihood is just not there. The probability, I think, is low. So,
Have you ever heard about this idea of gang stalking, for example? This is on the topic we're talking about, but it might not seem like immediately. But okay, so there's people that think everybody's stalking them, like the guy that drives up in a white car when always a white car drives. The white vans are following me. When I worked in NASA early on, I was like 19. There was a woman who had worked there, and then she left, and then the guy that went into her cube space after found all these paranoid notes about the fans are following me again, and and they see this, and it's related to schizophrenia. People think that some of them think that these messages are being beamed into their head from the CIA or whomever, and that everybody's conspiring against them, and it's smart people. For example, somebody that was working at NASA, probably a grad student or something, what I mean? Or I have someone, a couple people, but really, that think I'm gang stalking them, that I have not talked to for years, but then they still make comments and videos, which I can't see their comments, but I see other people responding. Do you really think this was about you? And that's why I blocked them, because that starts to get scary, that I am gang stalking them. And I know they're plenty intelligent, and it just shows you how the emotional thing works. And if you feel trapped with no understanding what's going on, and you make a thread that makes sense, it's so easy to hold on to that thread if that's your only thread to hold on to.
Especially if there's already confirmation bias, and that's kind of what you want to believe.
It's a big confirmation bias phenomenon.
Right. It's dangerous. That type of mentality is really dangerous. Yeah,
Well,
I
it's
mean, I
funny
just
how
apply Occam's
not more
razor. That's
dangerous.
all.
Like I was looking into this a couple years ago, and there were people online, and they kind of stopped doing it. I guess it makes sense that they wouldn't. But a vlogger talking about being gang stalked. It's like, hey, I would like random people known as subscribers to gang stalk me and listen to me talk about the gang stalk and these other. But there's like a guy at the Starbucks. That example was from a real thing. Oh, here's one of them. And the guy gets out. He doesn't know the guy. I see this car all the time. It's like, he might be going to the freaking Starbucks too in the morning. But it's surprising they're not more violent. If I actually thought people were stalking me and stuff, I wouldn't just take a picture of them. There would be some attacks. So, and yet they don't ever do that. So the sad thing about gang stalking is they're a lot less dangerous than some of the NPD kind of shoot up kids in a school kind of people. They seem to be the perennial victims. They're imagining victimization where there is none, but it could be because also they're victimized a lot because, mentally ill people, there's a lot of people that I would call mentally ill in some sense or emotionally ill, but they've got their wits together and they could take advantage of people that are a little bit crazy. And so, maybe there's like an emotional truth to it. But then when it comes to me, like I'm part of a conspiracy, you start to go, okay, yeah, this is dangerous. This is not something okay. It's not like just talking to a regular troll or someone you disagree with. I feel sympathy. I don't want you to have this anxiety. That's not what this conversation can be about. And it does seem dangerous anyway. But anyway, when I was looking into it and looking for people on YouTube talking about their experiences that believe in this, I was struck by how dangerous they seem. And yet how if I had been in the situation they just thought they were in for the 100th time, I would already take an action.
Right.
It would have been revolt time. So it's an interesting thing,
The thing is, the thing that's kind of scary too about such people is that like if they're always paranoid like that and they have all these crazy conspiracy theories, if even one of them turns out to be true, that almost they almost feel vindicated and they feel like, you see, I knew it, and then everything else just all of a sudden gains more credibility in their mind because of that.
Well, that's happened in gang stalking because there are cases like in high schools where a bunch of mean kids have set up even on purpose, right? It can happen by accident. The kid that gets picked on, he's picked on by 20 people. They're not colluding other than they all know, oh, he's pick-onable. But sometimes there has been cases where, a bunch of kids think it'd be a good idea to basically harass another kid with sort of passive-aggressive gang stalking. And it is also called gang stalking, and it can actually happen. And sometimes kids have gotten in trouble for it, and it lends credence because, look, if people could beam messages, if the CIA could beam messages into your head and had enough money to follow your ass around when you don't run any countries, then they would do it. There are people that would do that. Yes, we know there is the motive. This is a crime that doesn't exist, but it's not for lack of a motive. There's plenty of people that would want to do that and screw with your head just for fun, just to see mind control, just to poke the stick at the dumb kid or whatever, emotionally. So it's just that. And so they have a lot of confirmations by that. And if you go look up gang stalking, you'll find both what I'm talking about, which is the schizophrenia mixed into bullying, organized bullying, groups of people bullying other groups of people, which also does happen. So,
I mean, and that goes into the whole, I mean, I guess you, compared to me, you have a much more conspiratorial mindset when it comes to the government. But to me, a lot of that kind of plays into it as well, a little bit of that mentality, because, you look at things like real acts of real conspiracies, like the Operation Northwoods and stuff like that. And that kind of lends credence in your mind, or like at least other people like that who have that type of mindset about the government, that cynical mindset about the government. That stuff like that kind of reinforces their idea that everybody in government, or most people in government, are corrupt and to line their pockets with oil money and to get rich quick and that type of thing. But to me, the reason that I don't make that connection is because I just don't see the connection between some of these, old cases and like modern the government that we have now, because we have terms, right? These people are in and out, where the politicians are constantly shifting. It's not like we have some dynasty or some regime that doesn't change, like kind of like Kim Jong-un
Well, that's not
and
true,
his
because
father.
they don't recycle all the managers in the CIA and stuff like this. Because these groups are coalitions, you have to recognize that the coalition with Bush 1 is a very similar coalition with Bush 2, plus time. Some of the young guys are now the old guys. Some of the old guys are now gone, and there's some new young guys. But here's the thing. I want to make this clear. So my view on conspiracy theories, and what I often talk when I'm arguing with conspiracy theorists, is stop worrying about your conspiracy theory that hasn't been discovered until you learn all the conspiracies that have been uncovered. Okay, so go focus on the history, the conspiracies that did happen, then come back about the kind of things that happen and how they get discovered, and maybe you'll be helpful, and you'll find out that 9/11 might have been inside in some sense, but planes brought it down, and all the conspiracy theory stuff is bullshit. It doesn't mean there wasn't complicity, like we know Bush knew something about it. Okay,
Yeah, but
but
again, a lot of that can
go look back to what we know is what I'm saying. And then the second thing, and then I'll finish, sorry, and you could go, is what is the deal with the conspiracy? I've got plans. I don't tell everybody. Most people aren't even curious. If I was a billionaire or a government agency with a plan, not everybody would know about it. So,
right.
I mean,
that's not what we mean, right? That's usually not what we mean.
Well, I'm saying it ends up being the same thing. I'm saying it ends up being the same thing. There's, like I saw there was this National Archives. They covered this book of the plan to invade Canada in the 20s.
Well, no, I mean the
it wasn't a plan to invade Canada. It was a military exercise. Right. And is that a conspiracy? Well, they didn't release it until 75, and Canada was pissed off. It wasn't a conspiracy. No, it's like, Sorry, go ahead.
Right. I mean, a conspiracy theorist would look at something like that and think that we have plans to invade Canada. This is what we intend to do. And they don't realize these are just contingency plans. These are military strategies that they have to come up with just in case, right?
Well, the funny thing about that,
sometimes they can learn from those types of exercises and that type of strategizing,
So the funny thing about that one is this was with a conflict with the UK. The invasion was a part of a conflict with the UK, an imaginary one, I mean. And, at the time, the UK military, a lot of people don't really realize this, but into the 20s and stuff, the UK Navy was still the kick-assest, better Navy than us. So, arguably by people, but whatever. So, on the other hand, it wasn't because of really any idea of enmity. It was pretty much a mental exercise, and it was partially because making these war plans about actual enemies, when that's leaked, that created more disturbance. It was more difficult to if you just want to have an academic exercise so that all your war planners keep their wits sharp for the decade there isn't a war or whatever, you don't necessarily want a realistic war. You want something a little bit out of left field. How would you handle this? Did you ever think about, maybe the UK doesn't like us, and that means we can be attacked by Australia and Canada? It's just like, open your mind. It's to think out of the box, and it can seem like a conspiracy, and yet it was a plan. And it wasn't entirely impossible to happen. And if there had been some weird conflict, a communist take over the UK or something, they would have used the plan. They would have started from it. So is that a conspiracy? Yes and no. And really, we need to look at conspiracies like that. Yes, people have plans. Sometimes they're assassinations. Sometimes they're just unethical research. And sometimes, but they're real things. And
there's a lot, but there are a lot of assumptions there, right? Like you weren't part of those meetings. Maybe they did discuss certain options and they didn't think that they were viable for X, Y, and Z. You're not privy to that information. So you're just making assumptions that oh, well, if they weren't corrupt and didn't have a nefarious agenda, then they would have done this. But you don't know that. That's an assumption on your part based on very little evidence.
Wait, what do you mean? I don't get what you're saying. So let's be clear, because fine.
I'm just speaking generally, but I'm referring more specifically to because
I was just trying to say, what's the difference between a plan and a conspiracy? If I got plans and I have $1 billion and I can hire people to help me do the plans, I mean, I hire a pilot, I could hire 5 years of a construction for that could be called a conspiracy.
Well, no, what I'm saying, what I was referring to was like your justification for thinking that the Iraq invasion was done under false pretenses, specifically so that uh, they didn't really they didn't really care about the government there. They didn't care. They cared more about the oil and whatever, and exerting control over that region of the world. And you said that your justification for that, one of your main justification, it seemed like, was that they didn't um, carry out the plan to find those, you know, nuclear fuel rods or whatever, the way that you would expect them to do. Like you said that they should have hired independent contractors to do it, or something along those lines, or
I said,
the population in Iraq. I think you said you would have them do it or something. I don't know, something along those
yeah.
lines. But
There's a couple different things, yeah, that you're relating into because there's the Afghan thing where it's like if it was sincere, they would have smoked out bin Laden like they promised, and which
yeah,
I
there
honestly,
you go. And you see,
I as an
that
action movie watcher wanted to see, my most debased,
and
self wanted to see.
and
But
that's what I'm saying. It's
and then I'm
dangerous for you to
saying they
make
went
those
in there and they.
assumptions.
Yeah, and then what you're thinking about on the Iraq side is they went in there. Something I've said is right or wrong, whatever, is if they'd really been sincere about wanting to repair Iraq, they would have done what we did in Japan and Germany and hired the local whatever remnants of local engineering. And instead, they made a bunch of money on Halliburton, which a random coincidence was a company that our vice president had been a CEO
Right.
of.
I don't think it was a coincidence. I think once they were there, I think they're going to make the best of the situation. They were opportunists at the time, but that came after the fact. It's not something like, oh, we're going to invade because we want to help Halliburton. We want to help the
But come on, think about psychology.
Anytime there's a crisis situation,
what if it's like this? What if it's like this? We're going to have to invade these guys. We want to. It's it's the new project, whatever. Are legitimate. We think it's in the best. And when we go over there, we're going to have to reconstruct it. Oh, how will we do that? Well, we could hire Bechtel. We could hire Halliburton. We can, let's go with the Halliburton. That is thought of ahead of time. And they might not consciously be going, let's go in because we're going to go with Halliburton. But isn't it a coincidence how it all comes together in the way that benefits you personally? I'm sorry, I count that as the equivalent of subconsciously following what puts money in your pocket or makes you feel more powerful.
It's just way too evil and diabolical for me to
well, maybe this is part of the problem. Maybe I'm more cynical than you, and I don't even see it particularly diabolical in the sense that I don't see The Prince by Machiavelli as particularly diabolical. I consider it realist, and considering Machiavelli actually believed in publics and not principalities, what he told the head of a principality to do does not reflect his beliefs. It's how you have to run that kind of government, which he thought was inherently corrupt and thought republics should be the kind of government you had. So to me, it makes perfect sense and is almost justifiable in the sense that it can happen subconsciously. You don't have to consciously say, I'm going to do everything for myself, because naturally when you consider what am I going to do next, what am I going to do next, the whole of evolution is causing you to say, will this put me in a better situation or worse situation or better? So it's very easy to honestly believe that, like that CEO of once said, what's good for General Motors is what's good for America. I don't have to think about what's good for America separate. If it's good for GM, GM is good for America, boom, boom, boom. It's going to follow like dominoes. I don't have to check out. I don't have to rationally compare whether it makes America better or worse before and after. And it's not a dishonest thing per se, except for we could call it emotionally dishonest, or like people should maybe owe it to the world to be more rational about the cost of their actions.
Subconscious motivations, and I can't really. But again, it just seems like total conjecture.
Well, what do you think about this then? My other theory with the Bush thing was like, look, I admit I can't tell the difference between malevolence and incompetence. And you know the old saying, if you see malevolence and incompetence, it's probably incompetence kind of thing. Whatever.
Right.
Yeah, right. Except for there's plenty of people that know they can hide their malevolence as incompetence.
Yeah, but again, that's how the conspiracy theorist thinks, right?
So I don't know which it is. I don't know which it is, and I want to say, as a programmer, they're functionally equivalent. I don't really care what's implemented inside that function.
Well, I look for patterns, right? I look for patterns. I look for patterns. If I'm going to make if I'm going to form a fairly grandiose conclusion like that, I'm going to look for things like patterns. If I see them do, you know, a particular person or a particular group of people doing the same thing over and over again, then I'm going to lean towards your cynicism, right? But if it's like, you know, the whole story behind it to me made sense. The quote unquote, not the absolute official story, but the mostly official story, it just makes more sense to me than the conspiracy theory. It just does. There was a climate of fear at that time. He didn't want another attack to happen on his watch. The potential of Saddam Hussein passing off biological weapons to terrorists.
You really
I
think
think
they thought
that
Iraq was behind the attack? You
no,
really think
no,
that?
of course not.
Well, why would it stop
There was
another
the
attack?
risk. Look, the whole point.
Well, let me present to you that it's very clear. The problem was we had lost influence in all of the Middle East except for Israel. That didn't used to be that way. We used to own the fucking Shah. We used to have a strong relationship with Mubarak in Egypt, which also, because of the wars and stuff in the whole region, the Islamic attitude went sour on us, even though we had diplomatic friends, for example, in Syria and whatnot. And we lost all of that, right? We totally, you know, Iran was a black hole to us. We had mixed relationships with everybody else. We'd had a war with Iraq, blocking us from, at least we used to be able to help Iraq and shake their hand and give them weapons to fight other people, and they're right in the middle of the Middle East. So we had a big vacuum of power from their point of view, because Israel isn't really enough of a foothold for the Western interests. So we had to go move in over there. And my view on that is, I actually accept that that's the way the world works right now. I'd like to get to a better world. It's just that I think with airplanes, going into Afghanistan would have been enough, because it's not as central as Iraq, but it's plenty close enough. And so all the military planners should have been satisfied with that. And they wanted to go into Iraq because it really is in the middle of it. It's between Iran and Saudi Arabia.
See, that you're making that. You're making that the focus, and that's what I
you
don't
acknowledge we used to have a puppet dictatorship.
I think that I think that might have been one of the perks, one of the things that they might have considered. Like if they're probably on the whiteboard, right, and they're writing the pros and cons of invading Iraq, right, and I'm sure that that was one of the bullet points on the pro side, right. So, but I don't think it's at the top of it. Like,
what would you guess is the
might
top?
Be imagining the official story, which was essentially that he. There was this.
Okay, wait, could I stop you? Okay, I understand the official story. Weapons
not the official story. Obviously, there was a lot of embellishing and certain lies and stuff.
Fine, I'll give you all of that. But look, why didn't we go into North Korea then? Because all of those things really were true. But wait, all of those things really were true. All of those things really were true. They had nuclear weapons, in fact. And they have they have like 25% of their population in the military or some crazy thing. Don't quote me.
One. There's
why didn't we go there?
North Korea. There's no. All right, hold on. We don't have any reason to believe. Number one, we don't have any reason to believe that that North Korea has any sort of ties with terrorism. Right? They're not Muslims. Okay. Secondly, we know that that would have catastrophic effects on South Korea, one of our biggest allies.
Well, wait, North Korea has ties with Pakistan, who gave them the nuclear technology, is the way that turned out. So most likely seems confirmed to me, but that could be one of those things that's in dispute.
Yeah, but I don't think they did it.
So that sounds like
United States, right? Like it seems.
And also,
it just doesn't seem like they're
MO to 9/11. So that turned out.
But they never claimed that he was responsible for 9/11. Nobody ever suggested that in the administration.
And Iraq was.
I'm saying that there was a climate of fear. There was a climate. Look, at that time, there was this climate of fear. There was this feeling of impending doom that they were about to get hit with another terrorist attack, right? And Bush. He made the conscious decision that under his watch, he wasn't going to have this happen again. He wasn't going to take any more chances. Saddam had been defying, UN sanctions and stuff for 11 years.
Wait, Vic, we knew all of the people we accused of being the hijackers were all Saudi, and we know Bin
Not
Laden
all
is a
of them, but
Saudi.
a lot of them, yeah.
And
Most
we
of
know
them.
that okay, I thought it was all. I'll take your word for
No,
it.
it's like
And
15
we know
of them,
that
I
Bin
think.
Laden was a Saudi. We know that there is secret reports that they will not declassify about the Saudi involvement, this royal family / government involvement in funding all of that. And we know Bin Laden's one of that family. So
Yeah,
we
but
went to Iraq because we were in a state of fear. Did we not hear
well,
about
first of
his
all,
other
Saudi
stuff?
Arabia was not the one that was defying the UN, right? It was Iraq. It was Saddam, right? So, and he had every reason to want
In
to.
what
And the
way
thing
was
is,
he
and the thing is,
defying the UN? The weapons inspectors said he wasn't,
no,
and
yes,
that
he
if
was.
he
Look,
was, no,
he
he said
kicked out
if
the
he was
inspectors.
defying it, it was at such a low level because you can't actually move the kind of stuff we're looking at and actually maintain your lab. So he might be doing some funny stuff, but it's below a certain level.
Then why is it, if that were true, then why is it that all the members of the UN Security the UN Security Council pretty much unanimously signed Resolution 1441, where they said that Saddam must disarm or else face serious consequences, right? So if they were so convinced that he didn't have any, biological weapons anymore, any weapons of mass destruction, then why would they unanimously sign
Because
that
those votes
resolution?
go straight back to the state leaders that are political. It does not up to the weapons
Oh, so they were just
inspectors.
puppets of the United States? Come on, man, come
No,
on.
no, not puppets to the United States. They all have they're all part of the same thing of wanting the influence in the. It's never been just about the United States. Even when it was the UK and then the United States and the UK over there, it was always the entrance for Europe as well.
China and Russia
and other
constantly
countries
defy us, right? They constantly defy us, and that's why the UN is pretty much.
I'm not saying it's puppets. I'm saying there's a convergence of common goals among all of the leaders of the world. Why do you think they're making these trade partnerships that hurt both sides?
You don't think that the reason that they signed it unanimously is because they firmly believed that he was concealing weapons of mass destruction? Remember, when he kicked out the inspectors in 1998, he definitively had stockpiles.
I'm saying part of it is choosing
right?
which.
So we're to assume that in the next 3 years, he, on his own volition, without anybody watching, he went and destroyed his stockpiles like he claimed. I mean, that seems to be what ended up happening, but we had no reason to believe that. So what I think happened here, right, is that Bush, he tried to, exaggerate the evidence that we had, which turns out it wasn't any evidence for real, right? So he was kind of like, put yourself in the shoes of like a cop, and you know that this guy's dirty, right? You can't really prove it, but you just fucking know this guy committed the crime. You know that he's concealing this shit in his home. So then you might go in and like plant something just to give you an excuse to go in there and bust this guy. I know it's wrong. I agree. In hindsight, it's wrong, mainly because it turned out to be incorrect. But if it had turned out to be true, if the hunch was actually correct, then he would have been deemed like a hero.
I'm saying it's the confirmation bias thing. You choose what intelligence.
No, as a matter of policy, I understand. Yeah.
Look, Hans Blix and Scott Ritter were saying he's doing something. He's hiding some equipment or some barrels or something. We see him, fiddling around, but it can only be hiding so much, because you could take all the equipment out of a nuclear lab, and I can see that it was a nuclear lab anyway. It's not that easy. There's only so much you can hide. There's a very limit to what he's hiding, and he's not a cooperator, and he definitely has. So that's two people. And dude, this is not revision either. This is me at the time following this as they came out.
Right. But what I think
Ritter
is that,
ended up
look,
getting nailed for child porn,
given the climate,
which is weird.
Given the climate of fear, the feeling of impending doom at that time, it makes sense to me that he would, maybe not you, but a lot of people did.
But since I didn't have that feeling, I saw the irrationality, and what I saw is people at the top that aren't
okay,
scared.
Fine. Maybe you think it was irrational.
Of the nation to explain. Wait, no, let me interrupt this right now. Did you see this recent thing where they just found out that Blair was cooperating with Bush to invade Iraq a year before they said to anybody else? They were colluding to do it.
I don't know the circumstances behind it. I don't know what the
Well, we should look into that. I'm just saying that it takes a while to get their plans. Once they make a decision, it takes a while to make their case to the people. And
well, like I said, I feel that they were firmly convinced. See, unlike you, I don't think that it was a bogus excuse just to go in for some other nefarious reason or some other reason, right? I think that it was, they legitimately did think that he had them.
It was
right,
regime
and it made
change.
sense to believe it, in my opinion.
But wait, regime change in Iraq was an official American policy passed by the Congress.
Fine.
Right? During the Clinton
But
administration.
not necessarily by war, right? I
So
think that,
regime change, just in general, was already a goal.
fine, but not
And you're
necessarily.
telling me that the reason they did the regime change had nothing to do with that.
No, but listen,
See, that
look,
seems,
look,
that seems
no, no,
to,
look,
I'm
look,
not
look,
even
look,
call that
look, look.
trusting.
Let me explain why this logic doesn't work. It's like our policy for a long time was to get rid of Fidel Castro, right? Regime change in Cuba was our agenda, right?
I think officially it still
Now,
is.
if something happened, if something legitimate happened, legitimate, right, where we had reason to suspect that Cuba was planning some sort of attack, you know, maybe like, I don't know, the Bay of Pigs, something similar to that, right? And we invaded, you know, and it turns out that our assumption was actually wrong. See, people like you would assume that we had planned to invade them all along.
I'm not assuming, dude. I'm saying the reason you thought, I'm saying that when you have that idea already that there needs to be regime change and there's smoke, then you jump to the fact that it's fire quicker than you normally would.
Maybe.
And
that might be true, but
to invade, and sometimes it's like with this laughing witch stuff. She did something wrong. There are people on the MRA or whatever gamer guy or even just troll side that are in for the lulz that are like, you just justified me attacking you. Yay. Now, in that case, she really did the thing. And in a certain sense, it might have justified it. It's still an excuse. It's just a legitimized excuse that you can't blame maybe on the person, or you can, I mean, but just think of this as an example. You know, the person, of course she deserved, or in a country's case, you know, it had to happen. They were gonna really, it turned out it was legitimate.
Like I said,
it would still be an excuse, but when it turns out false, I'm sorry, it goes back on you, because it's very likely that somebody you've already marked for elimination, and then you eliminate them for an invalid reason. I'm sorry.
I'm not
think
saying
there's a good chance that you saw something imaginary because you expected
I'm not
to.
saying that he's free. Well, yeah, I think that is what happened, right? Clearly, it was a mistake, but it wasn't Bush's mistake. It was an intelligence failure, right? Because you know, he just had this hunch that let me put it this way: Saddam's own generals. This was reported by the New York Times. They have like evidence of this. Saddam's own generals believed that they had weapons of mass destruction. When we invaded, they were shocked to find out that they didn't actually have biological weapons to fight us with. They're like, how are we going to fight them if we don't actually have them? So his own generals thought that they still had stockpiles, right? So if they believed it, then is it really so hard to believe that we might believe it too? I mean, come on. So I think people just assume that the NSA is like,
but that's just the incompetence.
They're like gods. They have like eyes everywhere, and they know absolutely everything going on in the world. No, it's not true. That's why I'm appealing to
you as a programmer to understand what is, for some people, an esoteric concept of a functional equivalence. If two functions are equivalent, then there is a sense in which they are the same. And if the implementation inside has trivial differences or even a radical difference, those things are actually equally functional. So therefore, if somebody's incompetence works just like malevolence, or their malevolence works just like incompetence, to me, the victim, wait, let me just finish. To me, the victim of that, that's a value like 7 or -7.
I don't like that.
That's the value, that function, both of those functions, the incompetent or the malevolent, if they are equivalent,
net result is the same, but it's not the same from a moral standpoint.
So I am as just no, but let me put it this way then. I'm just saying, let's say I hate George Bush. Was it because he was malevolent or incompetent? Wait, was it because he was malevolent or incompetent? I don't know. If he was incompetent, turns out I hate incompetence more. If he was malevolent, turns out I still hate malevolence more, like I would like to. I'd like to think incompetent people could be innocent.
It's worse. Well, if it's incompetence, right, then I think that's a little better, because then at least you don't have this idea that this is like every president is this way. But if you believe in it's a conspiracy theory, now you're going to use this as evidence that all presidents are corrupt in some sense. They're all following this path.
I don't believe in those kind of conspiracy theories you're talking about. The version I believe in, though, that might be similar, but let me make a little distinction, is I believe in geopolitics. I believe that what tells what's going to happen is based on people's self-interest and how far those people will go in what they see as their self-interest. And that's the dynamic that controls things, and what religion it is and all that hardly even matters. It's really a power struggle. And that, in a sense, that power struggle is just part of nature and legitimate. And the only issue is that we need to increase the powers that we want, like ecotopian, technotopia future. You and me, we got to promote that. It's got to struggle in the power. It doesn't just get a free ride. Hey, idea, take over the world. That doesn't work. So there's a struggle. So in a way, it's almost a forgiving thing of how things work. But so it sort of sounds like it's a big deal about malevolence, but in a large way, I'm more concerned about what goes on. If we've had a series of incompetent presidents or malevolent presidents, is really less important than what they have done.
Well, malevolent to me is a lot scarier. I mean, stupidity, don't get me wrong, stupidity is bad. Really? But there are a lot of stupid people.
But wait a second, think about that. This is where Machiavelli comes in. I wouldn't, because incompetent people are unpredictable and basically irrational because they don't know how to decide what to do. A malevolent person, you can reason with them so long as you figure out a way to get one of their balls in a vice.
Right, but at least with incompetence, we can hope that was just an isolated incident.
Educate them, yeah.
Or you can educate them in an isolated incident, right?
I want to summarize now because it's getting long, and I think this is the point I'd like to summarize. I think it's an interesting thing. A lot of the stuff we've talked about is this issue between the innocence of incompetence versus the guilt of malevolence. I would say there's a guilt of incompetence and an innocence of malevolence as well that we can add in there. And really that this is sort of kind of the issue, how forgivable and etc. And possibly that's a theistic question, and it's not how forgivable, but how do we stop the
yes, that's
incompetent
discussion. Yes,
but what would count as competent, and how do we train people? And also malevolent people, how do we find out why they're malevolent? And maybe we could work together. Maybe they're not malevolent, they just don't want to get screwed over either. Who knows? It might work out that nobody's incompetent or malevolent.
Sometimes, like in the case of the Iraq War, I don't necessarily think that it was a case of incompetence necessarily. I think it was hasty judgment, and it's kind of like the cop, right, who is firmly convinced that this guy's concealing something, and he goes and plants some evidence, and then he's wrong, right? He turns out to be wrong. Now, the guy's not incompetent.
They went in hot, where you dive into what you assume is a dangerous situation, and somebody could get shot even because you go in hot,
Right.
So it's kind of like that. Yeah, that's part of it. I would admit that was a part of it.
Yeah, so this is more of a policy thing, more of a strategy type thing rather than an incompetence. Because I don't think that cop would be stupid necessarily, just poor decision making basically. So with regard, Sam Harris actually touched on this issue of this false equivalence that a lot of people make, and he was specific because I just read his latest book with Maji Nawaz or whatever, and that was a really excellent book. And one of the things he was talking about in an interview actually, and one of the things that he was saying that really bugs him is this false equivalence that people make between like collateral damage, like when the United States, when they fire off a drone strike or a drone missile or whatever, and it kills a bunch of innocent people, right? And then what ISIS does. So a lot of cynical people who, basically hate America and stuff, they will say that America is worse than ISIS, right? And they'll point to the number of bodies that we kill, and they make it seem as if they're like equivalent, or they point to like there's more bodies that we kill. But the point is that intent really does matter. ISIS is deliberately strapping bombs onto children to detonate them to kill innocent people in market squares and shit.
Okay, listen, this will be our
summary. United States,
wait. So we shot up, I think, with a cannon machine fire kind of thing, that hospital, right? Now, if you or forget that one, they admit, there's been reports recently released, they admit that they hit weddings and stuff where there are a lot of unaccused innocent people. Okay, now to me it's weird. It's the rhetoric goes a little bit more poetic with a hospital, but basically you're going to kill 100 people at a wedding, 35 of whom were accused. They were never tried, so not all of them were accused, but let's say there were unaccused people that were guilty. So it was 35, and you kill the whole group.
Right.
That seems
I
like
understand. No, I
killing a
agree.
bunch of
No, I
yeah. So
agree.
it seems the
And I
same to
think
me,
that
and
there
we're only
are,
worse in the sense that we're
yeah,
supposed to know
but
better and have the overwhelming force to go
right.
in there and arrest those guys. I think if we had some of our alpha man rangers go in there that are willing to do this kind of thing, risk their own life to a certain degree, and try to arrest those 35 people. And if the crowd turns on
Right.
them, well, if they turned and killed the whole crowd, it wouldn't be any different from what they did from the air. So
Yeah, sometimes, I mean, I think sometimes
yeah,
sometimes those types of operations, they can't go down like that, right? So it's a tough decision for them. But I agree that there are certain cases, yes, it is,
yeah.
they're way too casual with the way they'll just level an entire building just to kill a couple of
See, that's the thing. I'm an
high
anti.
profile
My
terrorists.
SJW, Vic, is I'm a peace activist, and I believe that the murder in war is real murder. And if people could see that, then they would
Right.
realize
But
why we
no,
don't do
right.
war anymore when we don't have an option. You do not go to war and get to make a mistake. You
But the
can go
thing
into
is,
a war too
the
late.
intent,
You
right?
don't have to go into a war extra early and preempt that
But
doesn't work. You have to go into it after there is no doubt.
right, but what I'm saying is like when we're attacking ISIS, the intent is to liberate these people. It's not to, just dominate the fucking place. Like ISIS. ISIS is out to just dominate and
No, but it's like saying those
drag it
guys
back
that
to
were
the
in.
Stone Age, right? And impose their archaic
But look,
religious system on
you
everyone.
bomb a
But
hospital to kill some terrorists because if you didn't, they might have bombed a
okay, but
hospital.
first of all, I don't
They
know
might
the
have bombed a
details.
hospital.
I
So
don't
I'm
know the
sorry, you
details
can.
surrounding that whole case, but I
But it
kind
doesn't
of
matter. It's
doubt
the same thing
that
I'm
that
saying.
goes up to the top, right? I don't think
You
that was
bomb a
something authorized.
wedding. You bomb a wedding because those terrorists were planning to bomb a wedding. I mean, it doesn't make
No, but
sense.
it's different because
It
I
isn't
mean,
really different. That's
are you
where
really
it's an
are
illusion.
you really saying that
We're in the past.
that the intent of ISIS is the same as the intent of the United States when we go on these bombing runs?
I'm saying the intent is not as important as the result. If you know ahead of time you're going to kill innocent people and
But
then
from
you
a
do it,
moral
no,
standpoint,
no.
they're
If
not
you know you're going
equivalent.
to kill, look, when you have friendly fire totally accidentally, I bombed that. I didn't know there was a guy, one of our soldiers there. Okay, that's different. But you bomb a wedding where you know people are not accused of any of
Right.
the crimes,
But there's
and
more goes
then
into
the
that,
intent
right?
was to kill those people,
Wait,
and
wait.
you can't say no. The intent was to kill the bad guys, and those people just got in the way. I'm
Right, but
sorry. If you're going
hold
to
on.
kill
No,
everybody
wait,
that
hold
gets in the
on.
way, your
But
intent is to kill everybody that
yeah,
gets in the way.
right, but I think, Pierre,
Right?
you're
You're a
looking
killer
at
that intends to kill people
hold
that are
on.
just in
Yes,
the way,
yes, but you're looking
which
at it a bit.
happens in these video games a lot, by the way, for
Yes,
the
but I think
game.
you're looking at it a little bit too superficially because I would imagine that what also goes into that thought process is what if these terrorists, right, by killing the head of the snake, like by chopping off the head of the snake,
Yeah.
it ends this war more quickly. It ends them, or it demoralizes them. Maybe these people, by letting this guy go, maybe he's one of the chief bomb makers. Maybe now they can't make IEDs and all these bombs as effectively. I mean, they're going to
Yeah, but
save.
they used to
It's going to be
think,
a net reduction
Vic,
of
before the social
unnecessary.
justice warriors got in on the game, the police, local police, and military police by the local governments of various countries, that's how they thought too. Maybe I'm better. I should just kill the people in this wedding because I know Sammy and John were planning this
No,
thing and they
no.
just let them
What
out.
I'm
You know,
it's
they
like
used to do that. No, wait. So if you don't want to go back to doing that inside your country, you got to have to grow and not do it outside your country too. And
but
it's
what
inevitable.
I
It's
mean,
inevitable.
it's
The
kind of
society,
like
the species either dies off or they figure out what
take
I'm
now,
talking about.
now I'm not going to say this saying that I defend nuclear bombs or anything like that, but I'm saying
Mhm.
but if we want to get like if you're so concerned about saving lives, right, then I've actually read articles where they say that dropping those bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki actually saved lives in the end, because if they
Oh,
hadn't
of
done that,
course.
that war would have dragged on. There would have been many more
Yeah,
casualties.
I took a whole seminar when I was at Berkeley that went into
Right.
this nuclear
So,
economy.
so
Yeah,
let's
I know.
take let's take that back a step, right? And then let's talk about one of your weddings, right? Those weddings where there's one of these really important terrorists that is like just essential to the group, and he's causing
No, no,
all
but you
sorts of
can't say that because
destruction
we're not
because
in war with Iraq right now. There's terrorists in Iraq that we're trying to attack, so it's not the same comparison as
right,
being
but
the
those
whole
people
country.
that they're taking, that those children that they're raping, those women that they're raping and turning into slaves, those people that are those innocent people that are being all the Yazidis and stuff. I mean, they matter too, right? Just because it's not our
But where would
people.
you draw the
They,
line? Well, could you just kill everybody in the whole country and we get all the victims, but also all the criminals?
Okay, that's a little too extreme. There has to
Exactly. The whole
be
thing is too extreme.
but there has to be a middle ground, right? There has to be some. But I agree, and these are tough
But you
decisions.
know the middle ground. Welcome
The
to the
thing
first
is
world,
that the thing is that
Western world. The middle ground
ISIS,
is you can't bomb a hospital to get a criminal in the hospital. You got to
hold
go
on.
arrest the
What
criminal. You
I'm
can wait
saying is
outside the
that
front door. You can wait at his house. You can
look,
bug his car.
if you read Sam Harris's latest book, which is basically a dialogue between him and this guy who used to be one of these extremists, not a jihadist necessarily, but a person who was a fundamentalist in a sense. If you actually read that, you'll know that these people, they kill with impunity, right? Like with us, when we do these things, I assume it's not an easy decision, right? It's a difficult decision to make. With them, they do it with impunity. And you know why? Because to them, life is
What do you mean a
meaningless.
sense of impunity, right? Because obviously they do end up in Gitmo and stuff. So it's a sense of impunity. Whereas Dick Cheney and George Bush and Wolfowitz, that was literally impunity. Literally, there is the pune is not happening. So why are you calling? You know, so let's just think rationally about who's getting. Now, I agree that they might feel guilty that, you know, people look back at his war as a big mistake and they have bad feelings. But if you erase the feelings and just go, what does, you know, impunity really mean? They did have impunity. People having a bad opinion of them is not punishment, and these other people do have punishments, including people that turn out not to be involved sometimes. So I think you have to be really careful, and I do believe it's like police work, of course, among equal powers, or whatever you want to say it, an all-out war. Yeah, you're not allowed to go over to see if there's innocent people in that place you're trying to blow up, because it's trying to blow you up, you know, their cannons.
Right.
So what else are you going to do? Yeah, I admit that. So, but as a peace activist, we want to avoid those kinds of situations. And these days with overwhelming forces, those situations last 80, 90 days. And then we get into a situation where the ethics of policing have to be involved, right?
No, I agree. But the thing is that that's not politically viable, right? Nobody's going to agree here in this country. Nobody's going to agree to another ground invasion, right? So unfortunately, it's just not politically viable.
Well,
and
I'm
the
with
thing is,
Bill
and
Maher
you
that if
understand.
you leave there, they'll kill each other until they've solved it.
Yeah, but is that the moral thing to do, to allow
Yes,
these
it
people
is.
to? I mean, do you see what they're doing? I mean, they're actually raping children, man. I mean, they actually sent out they were sent out a pamphlet saying that it's okay to rape these children. It's unbelievable, and the way they tell them how you're supposed to rape the women and stuff too. It's just absolutely outlandish stuff.
But if you think that the other communities over there that aren't a part of ISIS are going to put up with that forever, no, they will take care of that, and different sides will be allied in it.
Yeah,
You know,
but
and there'll be Iran on one side, and there'll be Saudi Arabia on the other, and let them do it.
I mean, clearly these people had read The Art of War. I mean, these people are using the civilians as shields, right? This is part of their tactic, right?
That's not fair to the Art of War.
They purposely blend in with the population, right? They force people out of their homes.
And I don't believe they're all locals at all. I believe there's been an exodus over there.
But I'm saying that when you're faced with a situation like that, what do you do?
They're not even Iraqis and stuff. Yeah,
I'm saying like the only way the only really.
It's almost like an internet mob.
Like either you bomb the house and you kill innocent civilians, right? Or you go in there with troops and make it completely a bloodbath, essentially. I mean, there's no good solution. That's the thing. But they need to be dealt with.
Again, geopolitics says, look, they're just a certain number of people, and if they take over a whole country's worth of area, whatever, have fun managing it while all of your people, all of the countries on your border, keep their military on the border and move closer in every time they have a chance. See how when your internal factions and the power struggles inside and the different strategies, their days would be numbered, right? The problem is if we go destabilize, it's almost like mixing things up, so it's hard for it to settle down. But if you just let it settle down, we leave. You got Iraq, Syria, Syria, Israel, Saudi Arabia, all around them.
Is there any sign of ISIS slowing down? If anything, these people are ramping up. These people have illusions of taking over the world. I mean, they're moving into North Africa now. I mean, for fuck's sake, they're about to cross the Mediterranean into Europe. I mean, honestly,
most people are willing to live under a system like that.
Well, apparently they don't have any trouble getting recruits. I mean, there are people joining ISIS in droves from around the world, even people from the United States, as crazy as that
Yeah, it's like a
sounds.
giant criminal organization.
It's insane.
It's like a flash mob. It's funny.
And I
Insanely
think, you
almost.
know, what contributes to a lot of that
So how many
is
people?
this
No, but you have to think,
mentality
Vic, how many
that,
people are there though? Can it pull out? It can only pull out so many magnets. You know, that magnetism isn't my kind of magnet.
I mean, you don't even need that many. I mean, the thing is, their tactics are so cruel and barbaric that that's enough to like bring anybody into submission. Most
I
people into
say that
submission,
what we
right?
do is we help everybody
Think about it. If somebody is
that is
threatening
fighting
to
them.
torture you and your entire family, to skin you
We
alive and shit, are you gonna fight against that? I'd be like, fuck it, I'll do whatever you
we
want. You know what I mean? Like,
no. Yes, I would fight against that.
okay,
Obviously,
well, you're braver than I am. I mean, I think a
well,
lot of people would be very
it's not a matter of
easily
brave.
intimidated, very easily intimidated by that type of shit. Because they
No,
are,
but my
and that's
philosophy is if
why they're
somebody
so
points a gun
barbaric.
and says, get in the car, what they're going to do to you is worse than getting shot by the side of the road. And you right then have a chance to run away. So, you know, I believe in that you do resistance, and I'm not the only one. It doesn't take
No.
every
But
person.
let's imagine that these people rush into your town, into your community. They
They could
steal
take
it
over,
all.
don't get me wrong, and you
Oh,
can have to go,
okay.
okay, but then you're going to
Right.
fight. That's what I'm saying. Then if it settles down and they manage to be Nazis running a whole country, but with enemies all around them, they're infighting and stuff while you just go keep baking bread and helping with the underground.
So how would you
Then,
fight like Gandhi? Because I mean, I got to tell you, ISIS would have a field day with somebody like Gandhi. Like Gandhi, like would be he and all of his supporters would have been slaughtered, and they would have laughed. They would have
I don't know, it's kind
laughed
of
over their
interesting.
bodies,
Well,
and
I
they
read
would.
Gandhi's autobiography, and it was kind of interesting, you know, because his first activism was in South Africa, trying to promote, you know, Indian civil rights in South Africa. And he did some amazing things where he almost got killed. But then again, his character of being that way is why some of the local, you know, sheriff and stuff backed him and helped support him and
Yeah, but
stuff. And
I'm
he
just saying that that would
made
never
progress.
work with ISIS
No,
because they're
ISIS is
so.
a out of control military. It also wouldn't work with the Crips or the Bloods, you know. I mean, so we're talking about. On the other hand, what I would do is just yes, support the people that are fighting them by trading with them, providing gas, even guns, things we have to sell, you know, and don't sell them to ISIS. And then if it gets over to Europe, you know, we have NATO issues and things like this, and there is a point where we have military obligations to get involved if it got to Europe or various other partner countries where we already have agreements, and we would keep those agreements. And pretty much, I think you'd be surprised. These things can go on for decades and decades. I think this one is going to burn out pretty damn quick because they're so radical. People don't want to live under that. Right.
Well,
It's very rare for they're like North
they,
Korea. They're more radical than North Korea, and North Korea is amazing. It's not often that those kind of governments last that long because not everybody is willing. You know, brain forcing is not that easy to do, really. It's a little bit trickier than that. And I don't see a society that says rape our young girls is going to last. I mean, they're going to start having daughters. You know, it's not going
right,
to last.
but
And militarily, I think even less because they have enemies on all sides of them. So I
well,
think we need to get out of there because there are people that fight with ISIS because it's a chance for them to be in a proxy war against the U.S. We need to get out, and those people will start fighting with each other
I think
because
they stand no
we're
chance.
what's
If the
uniting them.
international community doesn't
We
help,
are uniting them. We
they're
are
and if
uniting them as
the
a
thing
common
is,
enemy.
Kiro, is I think you kind of see this as like a charity case, and I don't see this as a charity thing. I think this is going to spill over into all of these Western
No, I'm
countries
just
and
not panicked.
eventually
There's
into the
time
United
to deal with
States.
that.
It will
There's
happen.
time to deal with that. There's a long way before it spills over into the United States, and
Yeah,
there's
but
time to
we're
deal with
allowed
that.
the longer we let it grow and allow this problem to fester, the more difficult it's gonna be to deal with it later on when we have to deal with it because we have no
Dude, I
choice,
grew up with the
right?
Soviet
If
Union
if
with nukes pointed
Obama
at
had
us.
not
Dude, I
pulled
grew up
out
with
of
the
Iraq
nuclear.
premature,
I grew up with the Soviet Union still pointing tens of thousands of nukes at us. This does not rank high on my. Oh my God! Hurry, act quick.
no, but
We can
but you know
handle
what?
this. This
you
just
want to know
takes
what the
time
difference
and
is, Piero?
sensibility.
The difference
Make
is
sure
that
you take the time not to do those irrational actions that you think accidentally
this
were
is
made. Because I say they're predictable, because that's why I don't forgive those guys for, oh, but they were panicked. Yeah, don't panic, okay? Calm down. Put on the peril sensitive sunglasses. I'm not
I
talking to you
understand. I understand
specifically.
what you're saying,
And yeah.
but what you need to understand is that this is why I think I really recommend that you read that Sam Harris's
I
latest
might
book,
do it. I have zero chance of
because
reading that liberal
what you
fascist
need to
book
understand is that
before,
the
but,
difference
I will.
between ISIS and these other countries that you're talking about that are, is that they are driven through because of their ideology. These people don't care about life, corporeal life. They are fixated on the afterworld, right?
That's
The
not really true.
promises of reward and shit. And
That's not really true.
this is
That's just
why
poetry.
it's not just poetry. This
Oh,
was
really? Then
confirmed.
why are
This was
they? Then why
confirmed.
are they raping young girls? Oh, they don't
This
care
is.
about this
Oh no,
world. They
that's
just
part
want
of
what
it.
they. Yeah,
Right.
believe me, they get
Well,
their money
but
and their filth and their silks, and they sit in a fancy and they drink
so
a
you're saying
fancy
that they're
wine
all
and they have a
applicants? Now I'm not.
nice Turkish tobacco. Yeah, they care about the worldly pleasures of being a organized
Look,
criminal.
I don't
Whatever they
think
talk
it's
about as
propaganda because I think.
their reasons,
Look,
that's not the real
the,
thing.
yeah. See, that's what Sam Harris was objecting to. It's that
Yeah.
even when these jihadis, when they tell you, in all sincerity, right, what their motives are,
They're fucking
people like
crazy,
you don't
dude.
believe them.
You don't
You
believe
don't believe them.
what crazy people tell you either.
You're gonna tell me that all these people are pathological? They have some sort of they're insane? No. No, I don't think that's what it is. I think they're
Well, they'd have
indoctrinated
to
with.
be insane if they really were doing what they were doing for an afterlife.
I mean, it's definitely not uh, grievances of U.S. imperialism. That's not what caused them to go up
And
to.
Why
Hold
wasn't the
on, hold
Ottoman
on.
Empire full of this
That's
kind
not
of
the
Islam?
reason. That's not the
Why was
reason
not
they're
the Ottoman
raping the
Empire
Yazidis.
full of this kind of Islam? Or why over in Indonesia, where most of the Muslims are, why didn't it
Hold
break
on.
out over there? Why did it break out in the Middle East? No
You're
reason?
talking. I'm not talking about the initial causes. I'm talking about right now. What is driving ISIS? Why is ISIS going into Yazidi town, raping all the children and women, and slaughtering all
Because
these
we
people?
ran a
Right?
war over there for
It's
10 years. Dude,
that's
it's the
why you
result of
rape.
war.
Really? So when you're pissed off at the
Oh
U.S.
my
and their
God, yeah.
imperialism, you're going to go and rape children? That's going to be the reaction? It doesn't make any sense,
Oh my God.
Piero.
Yeah, when you create chaos and you promote the power of the people that thrive in chaos, especially criminals like the chaotic and no authorities, and you send over people that have no authority over them to kill people and whether they're innocent or not. Yeah, those chaotic, when you destroy all of the structures of the society, you do have chaos. That's just a known fact in
They're
human history.
creating the
Yes.
chaos, Piero. There was no chaos like this until they came along. What are you
You're
talking
wrong. You
about?
weren't paying attention. There's been chaos over there since the turn of the century by my standards. But
Some
since
of
the
these
turn
towns,
of the 20th
that
centuries.
they overran.
Look, you don't want to face the
were-
fact. The British went in there and raped those guys for their oil. And they had a
And this is a
democratic election.
reaction to that.
They had
You know what?
if you can't follow 6 steps of history,
This is
that's
aggravating
why
to
you
me.
don't understand
This
what's
is
going on.
aggravating to me because you're even going against what one of these extremists, because that's who Majid Nawaz is.
No,
He
you don't
was one of them.
understand. Dude, why are those people in control? Why are the crazy people that are in control? I can find people in the United States that say the same kind of thing, but they have no power and no control, no ability to go rape little girls and all the rest. They don't have the power. What kind of thing could happen in the country where those people would get power? What could happen? Well, waging war for 10 years, proven to those kind of people, it's kind of like microevolution, right? You create a situation long enough where those kind of people do better than they normally would, and people that just want to do math problems and sit at a desk and do something productive for engineering, they don't get to. That's why I say go over there and pay for their engineers to have work, because so that they are given the extra resources to give them a power. And you rob those real decent people of an ability and an opportunity. And the people left are these criminal elements. So I'm not saying they don't really have these crazy ideas. I'm saying the reason those crazy idea people are in control over there is the result of waging war. So think about that when you want to wage a war, because it has to be so bad that That's
okay,
what you
fine,
do.
but that
And
should
in the
be a
case of
footnote. That should
Germany,
be a historical footnote for future reference, that not to do certain things in the future. But that has no. What is the relevance of that now? How is that an excuse for what ISIS is doing currently, right?
no, the reason to get out of there now is because obviously we have engendered enough people that are natively in the region that are at conflict with each other. Factions both see us as an enemy. And therefore, when we are involved, they will join together and ignore their
But
differences and fight together whereas if we leave, they will break up and fight each other. Even within ISIS.
What's so
Even
frustrating
within
is that
ISIS.
nothing in what you're saying, almost nothing in what you're saying, even makes mention of religious ideology. Like
Right,
all of it
because
is
that's
political.
unimportant. It's
All
basically
of it is
unimportant.
political. It's
Because
unbelievable.
it is unimportant in the history
Wow.
of geopolitics. Religion is simply a symptom and a pain. And you can go, wow, but I've been calling it right from the get-go. From the first Iraq war, from the second Iraq,
This
from
is
the whole thing, my analysis has turned out to be accurate, and what happens is what's predictable from other
Majid
things in
Nawaz, in
history.
that book, Majid Nawaz, who used to be an extremist, right? And he completely opposes what you're saying because he knows exactly how these people think because he was one of
Who
them,
cares? You're
right?
ignoring the fact it doesn't matter how they think. I'm talking about the selection process where that is the cream that rises to the crop. What is the environment?
What I'm saying
No,
is
no,
that
no,
this
dude.
focus of
No,
yours,
you can
this
totally
focus,
understand this, right? You focus on what I'm saying. Why does the cream? Why is that the cream that rises to the top? It has to do with what the fluid, what the environment is, says what cream will rise to the top. The aftermath of war and the effects of occupation, always and throughout every example in history, that's the kind of cream that rises to the top every time.
but the
So
only
it's
reason,
predictable by
the
now.
only
It's
thing
not
that
like
allows the only thing that allows for that to happen is this ideology that they have, right? If it wasn't for that ideology, they wouldn't be able to latch onto anything to do some of the things that they do. It just wouldn't happen.
but you're being irrational. Radical ideologies are always available. I enjoy reading them and learning about. There's radical ideology is available everywhere. If it
These
wasn't the
people
religion they
practice
have, it
it.
would be the
They
religion
don't
they
just
actually.
read about it, they practice it.
Oh my God! When the Irish, when the Protestants are fighting the Catholics, they use their Christianity to explain why they'd blow up places. Whoa, every
Read the
religion.
book and
Oh
you'll
my God,
understand. Read
the
the
Buddhism
book.
has nothing about being violent. I may do that for
It's
sake
just
of
not as
argument.
easy.
But
Yes, I
Buddhists
agree.
have nothing to do with being violent, and yet they've been stoning and killing and beating Hindus to death.
And
Look,
actually, Sam Harris in the book explains how a lot of that stuff,
to death, I
like
mean.
with the Crusades and the Inquisition, a lot of that had to do because it was a response to aggression from these Muslims, right? Because they were trying to like push them out and stuff like that. He explains a lot of that, and Majid Nawaz, he pretty much agrees to
Hey,
that
you know the
history. So,
religious reasons of all of that stuff? That's the story, the bullshit story, everybody, the opiate of the masses. If you want to understand the history of geopolitics, read The Prince. Or if you've read it, reread it. Reread The Prince. There's historical examples. Everything he talks about there is a historical example. And think of geopolitics in terms of that. There's kings that were fighting the Pope. Because of ideology? No, but that's what you tell people is because of ideology, but it's really because you're both trying to conquer Naples. I mean, it's just simple history to me. The religion of people is culturally interesting, just like what music were they listening to? What happened to their food? It doesn't really define the situation. The reason that the Muslims over there and the reason it's going on, it's yes, I say it started with this oil stuff, but it's not even a resentment of that. It's that situation has never stopped, right?
sure.
And the continual wars push things back into a state of true
Okay,
anarchy,
Hero, but
not
what I'm saying is that
libertarian,
this is all
utopian
great.
anarchy.
This is all great as a historical footnote, but it's not
That's going
helpful in
on right
dealing
now, dude.
with the
Oh my God.
problem now. In
Yes,
fact,
it is.
it's
Yes, it is.
counterproductive. You are
No,
basically
you're doing
giving
the same thing
cover.
we always do
You
in
are
this
giving
situation.
cover. You're giving cover to
No,
these people without even realizing it.
no,
You're
you are
basically
misunderstanding
justifying.
how
You're
the
justifying
geopolitics
what
works.
they're doing. You're essentially justifying what they're doing. You are, but anyway, we don't have to talk about this. Do you want to talk about feminism
But I'm
instead,
telling you
or?
the most effective thing we could do in the situation, and you want to do something else.
Is what? Become an isolationist,
The most
and then
effective
just
thing we
let
can
them
do
go
is
totally unfettered, and then just hope for the best? That's your
the
idea?
best thing as a general or whatever, you know, pretense moment, is their enemies surround them. They have plenty of soldiers surround them and keep pressing in on them. And if it gets too hot and you can't press in, or there actually is local support or something, okay, you might stop and wait 6 months or a year. During that time, they're developing internal struggles. Different people want to be powerful. They're not a real coherent group. They don't have one
Your
leader that they would
assumption is
respect.
that they're being opposed in equal numbers, and it's like it's all equal balance, and they'll eventually just implode. But I don't get that sense at all. I get the sense that they are winning, right? ISIS
So
is
what I'm
winning
saying is,
essentially, and they'll
what I'm
eventually
saying is,
overrun that entire
okay,
fucking country
so
if
what
left
I'm saying
unfettered.
is the unity within ISIS is only because of our involvement. They're people, like you're saying, from
Oh,
all over
come
the world.
on, Piro.
Would you just listen? I'm not saying because we're doing anything wrong necessarily. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying people from all over the world that hate the U.S., ISIS is a cool thing for them to go do. You were just saying that. Why? Because they hate us. You think those people
No, I don't
naturally
think
all
that's the
actually?
only reason.
Wait a second.
I,
But do you think those people agree on other things? Everybody in ISIS hates the U.S. Yes, but they don't agree on other things necessarily. So therefore, if
well,
we get out
no,
of
I
it, and
think
they
that
can
some
argue
of
who
these.
gets to rape which women, they will have fractions inside. Given that, the interests of Iran and Saudi Arabia and Syria, if it gets stabilized, and the rest of Iraq that isn't overrun by them, they have those guys in Turkey, the Kurds, they have those guys surrounded, and they got more people than them. So at that point, it's a risk game, and you know it's a matter of time. On
I
the other hand,
think.
if you run in
I
there and
think.
try to occupy, if you run in there and occupy, that won't work. Why? Because the occupations create these kinds of movements. Occupations create this kind of movement. Occupations cause this kind of movement to, like a tumor, have the room to grow. So it's better
We
to
weren't
squeeze them from the
occupying.
outside
We
and then
weren't.
conquer
We
them all
weren't.
quick.
We weren't Nobody was occupying Syria when ISIS showed up. Nobody was occupying Iraq when ISIS showed up. So what they
Nobody was
saw,
occupying Iraq.
what they saw
Well,
was
I
a
had to
power
summarize
vacuum,
this about a
essentially.
half an hour ago, so we got to go. But because this is fun, and I'd love to go on, but I know I don't have more time. But it is interesting, and we were definitely occupying Iraq, so I don't even know what
No,
you're
we
talking
weren't.
about.
All our troops were pretty much gone. That's the reason they came in
Pretty much,
when we
pretty much.
left
They're pretty much
prematurely.
gone. Pretty much gone.
Yeah, they came in when we
Where'd
pulled
they come
out
from?
all of our troops.
Where'd they
That's
come
when they
from?
flooded in. In fact, what is Obama criticized for? He's criticized for pulling out prematurely. That's what
Not
allowed
by me.
ISIS. That's what allowed ISIS to take over, basically. Well, they're in the process of taking over, but yeah. But anyway, we're probably
So
never
would you
going to
just never withdraw?
No, I don't know what the solution is. That's
ISIS
the
wasn't
thing.
here if we
That's
had
the thing.
withdrawn right after the.
What
How
I
come
know,
ISIS didn't
what I
show
know
up
for
when
a
we
fact.
withdrew Iraq War One? Why didn't ISIS show up
Here's the
after
thing.
Iraq War
Hold
One?
on. I
Because
don't
there was
know.
no occupation. There was no occupation.
Listen,
I don't know what
listen.
to tell you.
This
I'm
is
going to
a
try to keep educating you on how
This is a
occupation
multifaceted issue, and you're completely fixated on the politics of it. And I'm
No,
telling you that
you are.
ideology,
You're
that
fixed on
religious
this ideology and
ideology,
philosophy. What I'm talking about is called geopolitics. It's about how wars work. It's about how armies make the difference. It's how
you're
where the oil is makes the difference. It's about the fact that Japan had to knock on
yeah.
our door
And
because
if you
we had to
actually
go
read the book,
to China,
you're gonna see
Indonesia.
how that type of ideology that basically deflects all the blame, essentially, away from the terrorist. That's
You
actually
don't see why that doesn't
counterproductive,
matter. I
and it
would
just
read
feels
the
you're
book.
giving them political
Vic,
cover.
Vic, I think you should just be able to logically see how that doesn't matter to what I'm saying. I just said why those
It does
people
matter
rise to
because I
the
think it's
top.
counterproductive. Like what you're saying is basically like a good historical footnote. Like in the future, let's not start invading countries if we don't have to. That's fine. Great. Thank you for the advice. Okay. But how do we deal with this problem
Dude,
right now? And you need to recognize that religious
I've
ideology
answered
is a
that question.
huge
You cannot
fucking
understand
problem
it,
right
even though
now.
I know you have the
It needs to
ability
be
to.
dealt with. The culture is fucked. It needs to be dealt with. It's not even, as they explain in the book, it's not even just the jihadis that are a problem. It's these conservative Muslims who think that it's okay to kill people for apostasy, to
Okay.
to chop people's hands off for stealing, to keep
Back in the
women
day,
oppressed. All of that is a
back in the
problem.
day, ISIS was not in Iraq, right? Like
Right.
before the first war, the first Iraq war, they weren't there.
Right, and why is that? Because they had some tyrant
So there
in
were
place.
people.
And
There
isn't
were
that
people.
scary? Isn't that
They
scary
didn't
that
have
in
a
order to
tyrant
keep these
before World
people?
War One.
No,
They
hold on.
didn't. They
Okay,
weren't
fine.
as tyrannical. Wait a second. Women
Okay,
had
you're right. You're
more
right. I
rights.
thought you were.
Okay, so just stop. So the thing I'm trying to say is that what I was telling you and have told you several times is that society, they were all different kinds of character people. And the people that were psychotic and wanted to rape little girls because God told them, supposedly, that's where, yeah, I'm sure that's where you got that idea, dude. Then they were not in control. Dude, they were not in control. They weren't in control. They weren't in control. Listen, they weren't in control. So you telling me about a guy who's saying a book of the people in control now, this is how they really think. Yeah, how they really think isn't why such idiots get in control. The chaos is why such idiots have a chance to get in control. And I just want you to try to think about it.
Prophet Muhammad married a 6-year-old girl, Aisha, right, and consummated that marriage when she was 9 years old. Okay.
Well, our God raped a virgin that was engaged to another man.
That's where they get
our
the
God,
idea.
All of our gods in the Judeo-Christian raped a little virgin.
Yeah, but they
had
have
a boyfriend,
convenient way now.
Who had a husband. So I mean, I think you know what the morals of the whole Judeo-Christian is shit in the Bible. God is a big.
It's very difficult to justify the type of atrocities that ISIS is committing through Jesus' teachings. It's just not as easy. And Sam Harris explains it in the book, but you can read that later. Anyway.
Okay. All right. Take it easy. I enjoy it. I'm glad we had this extra half-hour segment.
And it sucks because I wanted to actually discuss feminism with you and social justice warriors. I think I'd like to have that discussion with you because I probably hate that.
Well, if you want to do that, if you want to do that, that would be a good reason for me to read that pseudo-liberal fascist Sam Harris's book as part of a planned agreement.
Oh God,
and you have to read The Manufacture of Consent.
Oh God.
Maybe that's what we should do. Maybe that's what we should do. Well, I'm being hyperbolic.
I'm guessing you're like one of the Reza Aslan supporters and Glenn Greenwald supporter.
How about we give each other a book we have to read? Or we could read one book together. I got some books that you would like on some of this history that really opened my eyes on conspiratorial things, but it's history and it's not conspiracy. It's things that actually happen. But anyway, no, okay, yeah, I would like to go over those too. So, well, I'm glad you showed up right before I left because this was an interesting conversation. We got Indifferent Sky didn't say anything. It's not.
I doubt we're ever going to agree on this, but it is fun to hash it out at least.
I think we're orbiting a center that's close enough that we can get actual ideas out, like they get emitted, and some of them, hopefully they're all kind of enlightening, but it doesn't mean you agree with the shit that you hear.
I mean, the thing is that I know that you have good intentions. I know that you have a good heart, and we both have the same goals. It's just that our strategy, our tactics are just fundamentally opposed on some things. I think.
Right. Yeah, right. And I attribute that to my superior understanding of historical fact.
Right.
Okay, all right. Take it easy.
All right.
Bye.